Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Monday, July the 31st, 2023, the final day in the month of July. I'm your host, Chris Phillips, of course, of the Spurs Up Show of the Daily Crow. As always, appreciate you guys taking the time to jump in and tune in with us. Again, on this final day, we close out the month of July in style. I see GA, John Edward, Jonathan Lee, Brandon Kuhn. What's going on? Jeff Gullidge. Appreciate you all tuning in. Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord. Thank y'all again so much for tuning in. Really excited to chat with you all. We got a fantastic week lined up, guys. A really busy week of content bleeding out the eyeballs. And of course, today's show, guys, we're rocking, we're rolling, a lot to get into, of course, in our third hour, our Q&A power hour. We'll get into your questions, your comments, your calls. I want to hear from you all. 843-790-3377. If you cannot call in that third hour, you can call us anytime, by the way, on that number. Leave us a voicemail or you can text that number as well. In our second hour, our good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, he will join us. And then in hour number one, we keep it rolling with content, guys. We're talking our 2023 opponent preview as we talk the Kentucky Wildcats and my good friend Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. And then, guys, football is officially back as we close out the month of July. Players report on Thursday, and the Gamecocks will hit the practice field to prepare for the 2023 season on Friday. And that being mine, we're going to talk fall camp, top storylines, position battles, everything you need to know to gear you up for fall camp as, again, we continue to count down the days to kickoff. It's going to be here before you know it, guys. We mentioned this over the summer. Hey, it's going to be SEC Media Days before you know it. Fall camp before you know it. We're here. SEC teams are heading to the practice field. Vanderbilt's out there. I saw Florida's out there as well. Every team in the SEC hitting the practice field this week. And again, guys, we will talk specifically South Carolina on this show today. Guys, before we get rolling really quickly, because, I'm really excited to have J.C. Sherburne tomorrow. He's going to give us a full update on the weekend that was in recruiting. Of course, South Carolina picking up a commitment from 2024 three-star Zymarion Lang out of the state of Florida. We'll talk more with J.C. Sherburne about that. But I just put out a tweet, and not surprisingly, you put out something even slightly critical about South Carolina, and there are some out there that just lose their freaking minds. All I said was this, and I will stand on it. I will stand on business, if you will. I understand that South Carolina, coming out of the weekend, is still in great position for guys like Dylan Stewart, for guys like Daniel Hill, maybe still in the mix for a guy like Jonathan Paylor, and many others as well. That does not change the fact that I am somewhat surprised that coming out of a big cookout weekend, the weekend where you kind of put your chips all in and put on your best face for your prospects that are visiting, not a single welcome home tweet coming from Shane Beamer. That is something that perplexes me. That is something that somewhat surprises me because we've seen Shane Beamer and company be very active in years past in the months of June, the months of July. This summer feels somewhat subdued compared to those previous years. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It doesn't mean that recruiting's going down the tube. It just kind of felt like it was somewhat surprising. I would have bet my money on that South Carolina would have landed a welcome home over the weekend. And, especially when you hear a guy like Dante Reno saying the month of July is going to be crazy. The month of July is going to be huge. I figured that the month of July would have been bigger than what it was. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a failure. I'm just saying I'm surprised. If that hurts your feelings, boo-hoo. Either way, guys, again, we'll talk more recruiting with J.C. Sherburne tomorrow, like I mentioned, and later on today's show as well. Zymarion Lang, obviously, I see Lang's 40 times a 4.31 coming from Arthur Bear. Yeah, definitely excited. We'll break down the commitment more so later in the show. Probably talk about that a lot in our Q&A Power Hour. Either way, guys, again, we continue along. We're wrapping up our opponent preview series. This week, we've got Kentucky today. We've got Clemson tomorrow. Going to be a lot of fun. That being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump into the conversation. My good friend this morning, actually, Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. He took the time to talk all things Wildcats as well as that game against the Gamecocks later in the season, guys. You're going to want to stick around for that for sure. Again, appreciate Nick taking the time, guys, as we continue that 2023 opponent preview series. Sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with Nick Roush of KSR Radio as we break down the Kentucky Wildcats entering the 2023 football season. As our 2023 opponent preview series continues, we head to Lexington, Kentucky to talk about the Wildcats, and who better to help us break down UK football than Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. Nick, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It is a pleasure to have you on.
I'm happy to be on the Spurs Up show. I've seen many takes about the Kentucky Wildcats on this show before, so I'm ready to unleash my own South Carolina takes. I hope your fans are ready for it.
Absolutely, Nick. We'll get there in a second. Let's first, though, talk UK. And before we look at this year, let's look back at the 2022 season, because I think by all accounts, a season that was a bit of a disappointment for Big Blue. When you factor in the guys you had returning, led by Will Levis, who, of course, is now in the NFL. 7-6, 3-5 in SEC play. You end the season with a loss in the Music City Bowl to Iowa, 21-0. Just talk about the 2022 season that was, and maybe what went wrong, what went right for Kentucky last year.
Things kind of got sideways before the year even started. Liam Cohen had that train rocking and rolling, 10 wins at Iowa, and then the Rams came calling, and he couldn't not take that call. So Kentucky was scrambling, looking for an offensive coordinator in late January, early February, and they tried to keep the continuity there by hiring an NFL guy in Rich Scangarello. And it was great in theory, but NFL guys only work if they're able to adapt to the college game, and that was his problem throughout the season, is trying to adapt and adjust. And Kentucky had a lot of holes to fill on that offensive line, and they were moving guys around, and eventually they couldn't adjust. They couldn't adjust. Rich Scangarello struggled to adjust. He took away Will Levis. He said, "We're going to make you a pocket passer." That's one of the better parts of his game, is his running ability. That combination of him stuck in the pocket while the offensive line is a mess, he gets hurt, and then it's a nightmare. They were a top 10 team in the country, lost at Ole Miss. Had every chance to win. Levis is forced to sit out the South Carolina game. They lose that at home, and then things got haywire. So as bad as it got, you still had a 7-win season, which for Kentucky fans of my age, right, that was the Rich Brooks high watermark. So Mark Stoops has raised the bar, but last season was still short of expectations in Lexington. And they were so short that luckily Kentucky moved on and they were able to bring Cohen back. So optimism is back at not an all-time high, but folks feel pretty good about where the program is entering the 2023 season.
And Nick, speaking on Mark Stoops, first thing, side note, I thought it was interesting. He was asked about Liam Cohen and the change at OC, and kind of like, hey, was there a moment that you knew that you needed to ditch what you were doing and get Liam back or change OCs? And he all but said it at SEC Media Days that, there was a moment that I knew, and there was a moment that I knew we had to get Liam back, right? That's one of the reasons for optimism going into this season. But speaking specifically, Nick, on Mark Stoops heading into his 11th season, what's the overall vibe and mood in Big Blue Nation around their head coach? Because I look at Stoops from afar, and I know there's some out there that will claim that he's a average head coach. I know you know who I'm speaking on, with the battles and the fights on social media. Everybody's got their own opinions, but he's changed Kentucky football. I mean, like you mentioned, 7 wins is no longer good enough. This is a program fighting for 8 wins, 9 wins, vying for finishing second in the SEC East, trying to climb that ladder like everybody else in the middle of the pack in the SEC East. But the overall vibe and mood around Mark Stoops as he enters now his 11th season in Lexington.
We're at a weird point where I know last offseason, the whole basketball football school thing, that was the offseason talking point around here. And surprisingly, there was you wouldn't expect that much football support, but right now Stoops probably has the highest approval rating on campus of any of the AD, head basketball coach, head football coach. And that's even after struggling last year. And I think it's just because the way that he his mentality, like when things are wrong, he might make you wait a little bit longer after they lose to Vandy at home to show up to his press conference, but he'll say, like, this isn't good enough. We have to change. I'm wondering, I know that moment was definitely the moment for Rich Scangarello, for a lot of fans. I'm wondering if Stoops had one before that, but the way that he seems to hold himself accountable and really speaks to the kind of blue collar mentality that a lot of Kentucky fans can relate to. That was his talking point at SEC Media Days: is we got to get back to being a blue collar football program. Fans love it. They just want to see a little bit more winning. I don't think any of us ever anticipated that Kentucky could keep up in the SEC playing hard nosed defensive football and winning up front in the trenches. But he's instilled a lot of pride within the state, and as we said earlier, like it's year 11. I can't believe we're at this point right now, but it doesn't seem like there appears to be an end in sight because the Big Blue Nation loves their head coach.
Now, Nick, as we look at this year's team, let's start on the offensive side of the football. Of course, Nick, the big headliner is that Liam Cohen does return as the offensive coordinator after just a one-year stint in the NFL. And you look at some of the best offenses in school history when the offense was really humming. You mentioned it was Cohen at the helm. You also pick up NC State transfer quarterback Devin Leary, which a guy that, I'm not sure, Nick, is really being talked about enough. You address needs at running back in the transfer portal. You lose Chris Rodriguez, but you pick up Ray Davis from Vandy, who was a 1,000-yard rusher, and Demi Sumo Carganbay from NC State to boost that room. Also, of course, I was able to ask Mark Stoops this at SEC Media Days, but the wide receiver room, arguably the best they've ever had under his tutelage. Barry and Brown, Dane Key lead that group, two fantastic players on the outside. Also, you look at the tight ends, Jordan Dingle, Josh Caddis lead a deep group there, and all five starters do return from that offensive line that struggled a season ago, but you boosted it as well in the portal, adding transfers Marquez Knox from Northern Illinois, Cortland Ford from Southern Cal, and Tanner Bowles from Alabama. So, Nick, when you look at this offense in 2023, what are you expecting? I would assume that Big Blue Nation is expecting a big turnaround from what they saw a season ago.
Oh, definitely. And a lot of it is, Liam Cohen's farther along now than he was when he came to Kentucky the first time. He had to know what it's like to call plays at the Power 5 level. Now he has that experience under his belt. He's seen success, so he knows what works against certain defenses, how to adjust accordingly from week to week, and most importantly, how these kids can take in that information, process it, and move forward. And I think the most encouraging sign and the biggest reason for optimism is that keyword processing. How Will Levis, that was his big struggle as a quarterback. He was a slow processor. That was probably his biggest knock in the NFL draft. That might be Devin Leary's greatest strength, along with accuracy. So you got a guy who can make quick decisions, who can get the ball out in time, with a coordinator who knows how to scheme stuff up. The last time he was in Lexington, he had two pass catchers. He had Wandale Robinson, who broke a bunch of air raid records at UK, and Josh Ali, who's fighting to be on the Atlanta Falcons active roster right now in training camp. So he had two quality guys, but one main breadwinner. Now he's got a diversity of weapons because they're 3 or 4 tight ends deep. They're 2 or 3 receivers, 4 receivers deep, of where defenses aren't going to be forced just to hone in on one guy. The biggest difference I think that you're going to see in this Kentucky team is, instead of the run setting up the pass, it might be a little bit of the other way around. Whereas instead of a 60-40 run pass, it might be flipped, because that's just where your strength are. Your strength is in your pass catchers. I asked Stoops this. He said, we're not completely abandoning the run. That's how the Rams system works, that Cohen runs, right? You got to run play action. You got to set that up. You got to set that up and run the ball every once in a while. But that's where Leary's bread and butter is getting the ball, letting his guys go make plays. So that part is going to take some time to adjust to. And not only does their personnel dictate it in their playmakers, but the new guys they picked up at tackle, Ford and Cox, their strengths are in pass pro. So if you give him a little bit of time to cook back there, they might be cooking with grease this fall at Kroger Field.
Nick, really quickly, Devin Leary, I know, battled injury last year. He is 100% going into fall camp. Is that correct? I know there were questions about his status maybe in the spring.
Yeah, he's good to go. We were worried he wouldn't be able to be active for spring practice, but after knocking some rust off, he should be 100% good to go in time for the season.
Gotcha. Well, Nick, as we move to the defensive side, this really puts it in perspective just how good they've been under Mark Stoops on the defensive side of the football. They fielded a top 25 defense 4 of the last 5 seasons. And when you have Brad White, of course, your defensive coordinator, that goes a long way as well. You return Deion Walker, a freshman All-American, and Octavius Oxendine to lead the interior defensive line. Trayvon Ripka returns on the edge as well. Linebacker, a question mark as Trevin Wallace and Eric Jackson look to fill the void of the departed Jaquez Jones and DeAndre Square. You've got Jordan Lovett as your lone returning player in the secondary, but you have a bunch of transfer portal additions in guys such as cornerback J.Q. Hardaway from Cincinnati, cornerback Jansen Dunn from Ohio State, and on the defensive front, nose guard Keyshawn Silver coming in from North Carolina.
Big old boy.
Yeah, big dude. Mark Stoops, though, Nick, preached physicality at SEC Media Days, and that's not just on the offensive side of the football, the defensive side as well. But defense wasn't the problem last year, but you do have some big names, of course, some big shoes to fill, especially that linebacker spot. What are you expecting from the Wildcats defense? I'll ask you this. Do they, for the fifth time in the last 6 seasons, finish in the top 25 defensively?
I would be disappointed if they didn't. Because of that front seven and how big and how physical they can roll out if Silver hits. You never know with some of these transfer portal guys, but if he hits, their smallest guy on their front three in this 3-4 could be 6'4", 300 pounds. I mean, they are as big. It's the kind of, Chris, I remember I watched Georgia when they had Noshawn Moreno and I think Aaron Murray back in 2004. And I remember going down to the field before the game and this dude has a club cast on his arm, and I'm just staring at the Georgia football players. I'm like, they're playing a different sport, right? Well, Kentucky has dudes up front that can play, that can stop the run. Wallace and Jackson are new guys, quote unquote. They started 16 of the possible 26 starts last year because the other guys were hurt. They've got a ton of experience. This run defense, JJ Weaver on the edge, he's a great edge setter in the run game. His run defense should be the best it's been in the Mark Stoops era. Now, how they're not in the top 25 is if they blow in the passing game, because the last time they replaced 2 corners, they got picked on, and they're replacing 2 corners this year. Now, there's a little bit of Andrew Phillips has been around for a while. He's expected to play one of those spots. Ideally, he could slide down to nickel in pass situations, and you've got a transfer out there that can hold down the 4. But that is a very, very important. It's the most important position competition in fall camp is getting that cornerback position right, because cover 3, you can hide a lot of stuff with cover 3 and some talented safeties who have played a lot of football, but you can still get exposed out there, right? Like, so the Tennessee has been the ultimate litmus test. They've just crushed those guys out there on those islands with those really wide splits. It's a long way away, but like that's the kind of game in this league where you cannot get exposed. And that's really going to tell the story of the UK defense this year, is how well those cornerbacks come along in the preseason and through that kind of slow start where they open up the season with a bunch of kind of weak non-conference opponents. Don't get a true test until Vandy in week 4.
Now, Nick, let's move to special teams, because that was a problem area for Kentucky a season ago. You've got special teams coordinator Jay Boulware. Chance Poore takes over at kicker. Wilson Berry takes over the punting duties. But, I mean, like we just mentioned, snaps, holes, they were a consistent problem a season ago. I'm sure you saw this, Nick, but I think it was on Monday of SEC Media Days, they had the rules guy in there talking about new rules, and they mentioned the roughing the punter rule in the game, I think against Missouri, something like that. But it was just an example of like a snap over the head, and you're like, man, special teams was rough last year. Berrien Brown, though, on the bright spot, does serve as a dynamic return man. But, I mean, what are you expecting from Kentucky special teams? I think the goal obviously just has to be, it doesn't have to be great, but it can't lose you ball games.
Oh, man. It was the opposite of Beamer ball. It was losing Kentucky football games. And they got bailed out in that Missouri game by a bad snap. Because of that little technicality of the rule. And as Stoops said, it's time to make the routine. And it was not routine whatsoever. So they actually had, like some of those guys you mentioned moved up, but he hired Jay Boulware who had experience with his brother Bob at Oklahoma, was obviously at Texas as well. But he just said, hey, Jay, come here, fix this. We'll give you scholarships to use. Just do whatever you got to do. And they added like 5 new guys. They got a new snapper. They got a new kicker from Georgia Southern, Alex Rayner. They got new everybody. And so really that is the emphasis this year is, hey, don't get field goals blocked. Don't get punts blocked. just do the basic ordinary stuff. They're getting rid of the Aussie style way of punting as well. But it was one of those things where there for a while, Chris, it was, I wouldn't say necessarily a strength, but they had a Ray Guy winner. They had an all-SEC place kicker in Austin McGinnis. They had some good things going for them. It went completely off the rails last year, and it has to get back to normal this year where it's not costing you yards because Barron Brown is a dynamic return man. He returned one kick for a touchdown last year. He had another one called back. He tripped over his own guy's feet, and another one. There's another special teams miscue, right? So there's potential there if they get it fixed. Mark Stoops, he invested a lot of resources to make it happen. They got to get it done this fall.
12 starters return, Nick, for this Kentucky football team. 7 on the offensive side, 5 on the defensive side. And Kentucky, of course, like we mentioned, looking for that big turnaround from a season ago. You look at this 2023 schedule. You open up with Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, at Vandy. Things set up pretty well to, I think, start 4-0. Then you have Florida at home. Then that big game to kick off October at Georgia. Then you have Missouri, Tennessee, at Mississippi State, Alabama, which is going to be a fun home date for sure, at South Carolina, which we'll get into more in just a second, and then at Louisville to close out the season. Nick, how do you feel that 2023 schedule shapes up, and how does it set up for the Wildcats to have that turnaround season all in Big Blue Nation are looking for?
A lot of it comes down to if you're an optimist or a pessimist, but in a sense, the early runway. I love the SoCon Saturday, right? You love getting a break sometimes later on in the year, just to catch a breather. You know, like, hey, you can take a game off, right? We big guys on the inside, take a week off. We'll beat up on an FCS opponent so we can get ready for Alabama. But they don't get any of those later on in the schedule. However, getting the early runway to get Cohen's feet underneath him, get Leary cooking, get his relationship, that chemistry developed. I think that's important. It's important for that cornerback position as well to make sure they know who they can trust out there by week 4. That Florida game can be really important. And I ideally, it's not unrealistic. And I think a lot of people would predict that Kentucky's 6-1 hosting Tennessee in October. Is that asking a lot? Yeah, but that all that means is you won at Vandy, you beat Florida at home, you took care of business. So if they get to there, the best thing the Cats have going for them is the depth on the defensive line and the depth in the running back room and those pass catchers. Because guys get hurt, they're going to get injured. But there's a scenario where the guy who's RB3 or RB4 on the depth chart, like Demi Simba-Karmbe or Ray Davis, or not Ray Davis, but like Jamarion Wilcox was a huge blue chip recruiting win. There's a scenario where one of those guys is, just for lack of a better term, is a badass by November. That he's got enough left in the tank. The other guys get beat up early, and they could still be productive in November in that tough stretch of the schedule. Same thing on that defensive line where they're 2 or 3 deep. Guy gets banged up here and there. They're not necessarily missing a ton. Now, of course, you don't want to lose your star power, but if they can have some of those guys left with a little bit reserves there, that's when that difficult game, like South Carolina at South Carolina, moving that game to November, that's going to be a true test to their depth because you know that's going to be a dogfight down there in Columbia at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Now, Nick, speaking specifically on that game, and again, you and I sort of had this convo off air, but I want to bring this to the forefront before we dive into the actual on-field X's and O's, what have you. Mm-hmm. South Carolina beats Kentucky last year in Lexington. First time in a decade the Gamecocks have won there. You look at the recent trends, recent history. South Carolina, while they lead the overall record, the overall series, Kentucky's won 7 of the last 9 in this series. We had a very similar conversation with our friends from Mizzou last week in the sense of, and I'll tell you right now, Nick, fair, unfair, I'm simply just the messenger. Gamecock fans look at Kentucky football as lesser. They look at Kentucky football as along with Vandy. This should be a chalked up W every year. Kentucky's not a football school. They're a basketball school. And it's kind of one of those things, you know, I haven't seen it specifically, but I saw a Gamecock fan tweet this about Missouri. I've heard this about Missouri. I'm sure the same is felt about Kentucky. Gamecock fans feel no matter if Kentucky wins the game, South Carolina is better. It's a game South Carolina shouldn't lose. They should win every single year. You heard, we talked about this. You heard Steven Garcia on our airwaves last year talk about how porous the atmosphere is at Kroger Field. I say all that not to piss you off. I'm just curious to hear the Kentucky perspective on the South Carolina-Kentucky game, because the way I view it is a coin flip, a toss-up game, and when I try to convey that to Gamecock Nation, they do not receive it well. I'm curious, what is the feeling from Kentucky Nation, yourself, on South Carolina's program, and more importantly, the series between the Wildcats and the Gamecocks?
Well, I think I can pinpoint some of the you can bring a lot of the South Carolina entitlement back to Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier. You got two national championship winning head coaches. You're going to feel good about your program, especially when Spurrier really got rocking and rolling. You had the 3 10-win seasons in a row. And that's where a lot of the disdain for South Carolina starts. We were dealing with Spurrier for a long time. And it was to finally it was one of the demons they had to exercise was beating Spurrier. But ever since they got him that second time, they forced Spurrier into earlier retirement. He wasn't ready to hang him up at the end of the year, but when he was losing at Kentucky again, it made him think about where he was going. I love that Kentucky fans they seem to take their cues from Mark Stoops too, because Mark Stoops, he's got his own personal resentment towards South Carolina head coaches. Him and Will Muschamp had very similar resumes, but he didn't get the same treatment from the media that Will Muschamp did, right? And he had similar results, maybe even better results. He won the head-to-head matchup against Muschamp more times than not, and that's the part that kills Kentucky fans. It's, all right, y'all were good 15 years ago, but look where we are now. Look where both teams are right now. And it's been, if not an even playing field, Kentucky's been better the last 7, 8, 9 years, especially on the head-to-head front. And it is, we joke, South Carolina, they're the offseason champions every year. I don't know what it is that gets everybody in the media to drink the Kool-Aid, whether it's Will Muschamp passing it out or Shane Beamer. Everybody falls in love with them every season. And now we're at a point, and here's something scary for South Carolina fans they don't want to hear. You're in a situation that Kentucky was in last year. Dal Loggins is your Rich Scangarello, okay? You get this NFL guy who's been shaky through times of time. He's had some good quarterbacks, but they haven't been very good when he was there. Now there's a bunch of question marks on the offensive line. You've got this quarterback who's supposed to be really good. A lot of people hate him, though, but he should play in the NFL, but a lot of people don't like him. This could be a year very similar to the one that Kentucky had last year where they fall flat on their faces, but I don't think that South Carolina fans are rooted in reality. They're still, it's instead of feeling like 98 for Vol fans, it's 2010, and Kentucky fans resent the hell out of it. And every time both teams meet on the field, it's nasty. You can feel it. I love the rivalry that's developed. And last year, Beamer, he's throwing more gas on the fire, wearing the sunglasses, taking that loss. I know that Kentucky's going to be ready when they travel to Williams-Brice Stadium in November.
Nick, do you think there's a real beef between Mark Stoops and Shane Beamer? I actually asked, I forget the offensive lineman that Kentucky brought to SEC Media Days, but, I asked him about the game and kind of in a roundabout way, just asked, hey, like, what do you think about Shane Beamer, Mark Stoops? Is there some extra juice in that game? But I'll ask you, and, he answered the question very professionally, as, you'd expect, hey, we're just two teams fighting to get a win. What would you say? I mean, is there real beef between these guys?
So I'll give you the Mark Stoops answer. He always says, it's an SEC East game. Every one of those is important. We have to win. And part of it, I mean, Kentucky's success under Stoops is beating South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Missouri regularly. They've got 5-game winning streaks under all of them during his tenure. I want to say there's something like 16-4 in those games in the last 8 years. You have to have a good season. You have to win those games. Like there's no way around it. But there is extra juice. There's no denying it. And I think some of that comes with the atmosphere in that game. I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. Williams-Brice is one of the most fun places to watch a game in the SEC. That place, Sandstorm, hate it or love it, it's awesome. That place gets to rocking. And I think a lot of that juice comes from that was where Kentucky got their first road win in the SEC in something like 4 or 5 years. And to go in there and do that, I think a lot of it is just the nature of that game and its importance to year by year. But there is a little bit of a, one to throw a little bit extra in there because Beamer is the antithesis of Stoops, right? When it comes to, I mean, it's not just they have different upbringings. They both have the last names that carry a lot of weight in this sport. But Beamer's the guy who, he'll go on all the podcasts, he'll do all the interviews, he'll do the gimmicks with the videos, he'll be Michael Scott. He does all of that. Stoops is just he's no nonsense, right? Like he might, crack a joke here or there, but he's all ball. He's just a ball coach. And so that's where I think their clash in personalities it adds a little bit more. It does. There's no denying it. And I think to do so would be foolish. Mark Stoops, he wants to beat the hell out of Shane Beamer.
Do we see sunglasses pulled out from either side, you think, at this year's game?
Oh man, I hope so. Like I need sunglasses in the handshake line too, where the state troopers have to separate them afterwards. I need it.
Jeez. Well, Nick, you look at the game. Let's talk about the actual game. Just your brief. We got a long way to go before that game, takes place, and these two teams we'll know who they are by that point. But just the overall outlook. I mean, you mentioned the challenges of playing at Williams-Brice Stadium. I think it'll be a matchup. It should be against, two pretty solid quarterbacks with Devin Leary, Spencer Rattler. I think line of scrimmage yet again is going to be that's when I look at it, Nick, and the reason I think Kentucky was beating Carolina like a rented mule for so many years was they were just the more physical football team. I mean, bottom line, and that's what Stoops preached, and South Carolina has had their issues in the trenches, and that could be a problem yet again. So I look at that as a key anytime you play Kentucky. The play of Spencer Rattler, again, if that game's at night at Willie B, I think things change. But just overall thoughts on that game. And I'll say this, the importance of it for Kentucky. I mean, again, it's your second to last game, your final conference game. And I think it's certainly one that, for the Wildcats, and I think the Gamecocks, because this follows before, and both schools have an ACC rival. This follows both. You guys go to Louisville. Gamecocks take on Clemson. It's a big game and a big way to close out SEC play.
No, there's no doubt about it. And especially when you think of the bars, right, in your mind, where you're like, well, we're at least a 7-win team or an 8-win team. As a fan, that's kind of the mode you go through. This feels like a game that to get to 8 wins at Kentucky, which feels like the floor, you need to take care of business at South Carolina. So I really think that the big advantage that Kentucky would have in this game is South Carolina's running game. I just don't know if it's going to be anything, right? After you lost Marshawn Lloyd and there's so many moving parts on that offensive line that Kentucky's size in the trenches really forcing obvious passing situations. If you can at least have your secondary, even if there is some weakness at the cornerback position, and they at least kind of know what's coming to them, for the lack of a better term, that helps so much. So I think being able to stop the run against a not very good running game from South Carolina, Kentucky should have a big leg up there. But a lot of it, I think, is going to come to how much do they have in the tank, because the week before, I want to say, is Alabama, and then 2 weeks before that, Tennessee. So, like, maybe Missouri, but like that is a very difficult stretch. How healthy are they? What's Devin Leary like? Because, I mean, if you made me handicap the game at the same time last year, I would have said, well, with Will Levis, it's going to be hard to beat that guy. And Lexington, well, he didn't even play, and they were down 7-0 before the game even started. So, but I do like, just from on paper up front, Kentucky's defense in the trenches versus South Carolina's offense in the trenches. It's going to be hard for them to get 2 or 3 yards at a time, especially on those hard to get yards. But elsewhere, like, South Carolina's secondary does give me a little bit of, like, they can neutralize some of that firepower. And if you look at the series as of late, it's been a lower scoring affair for the most part. So you're going to have a limited possession game. I'm fascinated too, Chris, just how these games go early on with the new clock rules. How fast are they? I don't think it's going to be like the baseball pitch clock, but in the way that Stoops likes to play in limited possessions, I certainly think that games like this are going to be much tighter just because that clock's going to be rolling.
Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio does a fantastic job talking all things Wildcats and SEC football. Nick, let everybody know where they can find your work.
At Roush KSR, ROUSH KSR on Twitter is where you can tweet all of your hate at me after just please bring it on. Love getting it back and forth with Gamecock fans. But we're also on the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel. Got a lot of live shows Monday and Wednesday evenings, and I do a tons of stuff. So if you need a platform for UK athletics, you need to follow what's the Kentucky guys thinking. feel free to reach out. Don't worry, I won't bite. I'm not too mean, but I will definitely talk trash back to you. And also, I got to give a shout out. Is it what's the sandwich shop? Is it Harpo's in Columbia?
Gauchos?
Groucho's.
Yeah.
Man, they've saved me many a game day mornings after a Friday night at 5 points. The dipping sauce,
Yeah.
killer. We'll have a good time out in Columbia, especially when Kentucky wins.
Andy's Deli, another good one you should check out in 5 Points, my friend. Similar sandwich shop, similar to Groucho's, both very good. Nick Roush, KSR. Nick, let's definitely do it again sometime, my friend. I appreciate you taking the time.
Definitely. Been a pleasure.
Okay, that was Nick Roush, Kentucky Sports Radio. That was a fun conversation. As you can tell, Nick is a bit of a firecracker, has his takes, opinions, which is why I enjoy the conversation so much. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, though, we'll get into the chatter as we're talking Gamecocks fall camp. South Carolina is back on the practice field this Friday. We'll talk top storylines, position battles to watch for, all that, and much more here on this Monday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge, where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars. Or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent you. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
That's your Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, July the 31st, 2023. Hope you guys enjoyed the new commercial break with the ad reads for our friends over at Carolina Cigars and Rhine Law Firm, LLC as well. You guys will be seeing that moving forward. So, again, want to say thank you to them. And you'll be seeing that, of course, in every single commercial break with more ads, I believe, to follow as we go into the 2023 football season. Always exciting things because, guys, obviously, our business partners are what keep us afloat and give us the opportunity to do what we do every single day. They are a major piece in this operation. So, again, want to say thank you for the love and the support from you guys, because without it, that would not be possible. Again, guys, hope you enjoyed your weekend. Hope you're having a fantastic start to this week. And as we close out the month of July, we look towards the month of August. There's football in August, and that's a reason to smile. That's a reason to be happy. The Gamecocks will hit the practice field later this week. And in lieu of that, I talk top 5 storylines for Gamecocks football entering fall camp. The top 5 things that I'm most keeping an eye on and some of the questions that I'd like to find some answers to. It may be tough because, of course, we're not there on the field at practice, in the building, what have you, but you can read between the lines. You can look for certain cues, for certain clues on what this football team may look like this season. And I start, guys, what's South Carolina going to be offensively? Dowell Loggins looking to hit the ground running in his first year as offensive coordinator. And as I've mentioned before, and I'll say it again, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this Dowell Loggins thing is that normally you think to yourself, okay, it's a brand new OC. There'll be some sort of a grace period. You know, it might take a couple of games for the offense to get rolling. No big deal. I don't see that being the case, especially when you open up with the likes of North Carolina. You've got Mississippi State in week 4. You've got Tennessee in week 5. Florida week 6. By the way, you've got Georgia and Athens as well. Your offense, if you're going to be able to weather the storm and have a successful first half of the season, your offense has got to be clicking on all cylinders, especially in that week 1 game against North Carolina. I know many of you out there think it's as simple as they're just going to pick up right where they left off from last year and run the same offense they did against Tennessee and Clemson and Notre Dame. It's going to be identical to that. Did we learn nothing from this time last year when it was the exact same mantra, the exact same belief coming off the Duke's Mayo Bowl? South Carolina's just going to pick up right where they left off and run the same exact offense. You and I both know it's just not that simple. Dowell Loggins, of course, going into the spring. Now he has the fall to continue to install his offense, whether it be verbiage, it be, things schematically they want to do, what have you. Of course, later into fall camp, they'll get into specifically UNC prep. But this is a huge fall camp for not just the Gamecocks, of course, as a whole, but Dowell Loggins as he gets ready to get South Carolina off to a fast start. Because as we all know, first 2 years of Shane Beamer, this is a football team that is somewhat stumbled out of the gate. They've started somewhat slowly. I mean, look at last year, guys. Gamecocks, I don't feel really played a complete game until the Tennessee game, maybe the Vandy game. But, I mean, it took about 8-9 weeks for that thing to even really get rolling. You can't afford that this season. It starts on the offensive side. Dowell Loggins getting this thing rolling and hitting the ground running going into the 2023 season. Pivotal as the Gamecocks navigate through fall camp. This is also a football team, guys, searching for answers in the running game. The running game has got to be the talk of fall camp, I think. I mean, it's one of the top, if not the top storylines, and I think it's the biggest question mark going into the season. Because guys, not to spoil anything when we get to defensive line and all that, we break everything down, but this is stuff that I've talked about before, that If I had to pick one, offensive line or defensive line, running the ball or stopping the run, the one that I think will do better, will overachieve, I think stopping the run. I believe in that group probably a little bit more because I think that group has some real dudes, has some athletes, while they may be young, and guys that can step in, overachieve. They've also got Travian Robertson at D line coach, and I believe in what he's going to do at Carolina, and I think they could take a step forward. But when it comes to the running game, listen, we know what you have offensively with Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells, Xavier Legette, the weapons on the outside, Trey Knox at tight end. Can South Carolina find a way to manufacture some sort of running game to give them balance this season? Is it Dakereon Joyner? Is it Juju McDowell? Is it Mario Anderson? Is it Dontavius Braswell, the freshman? How does the offensive line shake out, especially with no Jalen Nichols? Think about it, guys. Jalen Nichols went down in the spring game. They have not orchestrated a practice without Jalen Nichols in it. Not an organized practice. They have not. This will be the first time they do so beginning on Friday. Is South Carolina able to find a starting five that not just makes sense, but that is productive, that gives South Carolina a chance offensively? Because as you and I both know, it doesn't matter how many playmakers you have on the outside. It doesn't matter all the weapons you have. If you can't open a hole, if you can't block, if you can't give Spencer Rattler time to throw the football, it doesn't matter. Searching for some answers up front, but specifically in the running game. Who emerges on the offensive line? Who emerges at the running back position? Those are going to be two fascinating battles, and a fascinating storyline to watch is just how are we feeling? What's the vibe? What is the message coming out of fall camp in regards to the Gamecocks rushing attack? Moving to the defensive side, guys, something I'm really excited for. I'm excited for this group. Again, we haven't gotten there yet in our position unit preview series, but a linebacking core that is looking to break out. I am very excited to hear intel from fall camp in regards to who's stepping up at the linebacker position. Guys, we've heard that Mo Kaba is more than likely going to be limited coming from Shane Beamer. He will be limited early on. And I think that's one of those things, guys, they just want to protect him, right? After coming off the injury last year, I think it's one of those things. You know he's one of your guys. You know he's one of your dudes. You just want him to be healthy for week one and beyond. But there's a lot of guys in that room. There's a lot of upside in that room. Guys who need to take the next step in fall camp and step up. Guys like Jerron Willis, the Ole Miss transfer. Pup Howard, the true freshman. Stone Blanton, the sophomore who was once a prized recruit out of the state of Mississippi. Debo Williams, who has been a nice player, but I think you'd like to see now as a veteran to kind of jump into a leadership role. There are a plethora of guys. As much talent, I think, in that room as probably in quite a while, to where you say to yourself, okay, this is now a room that maybe it's no longer an eyesore. Maybe it's solid. It's been a while since the Gamecocks top to bottom in the linebacker room have been, dare I say, solid. So a linebacking core looking to break out. Which players break out? And again, does it make us feel a little bit better going into kickoff that rush defense could take a major step forward this season? As Shane Beamer spoke at SEC Media Days, guys, and he mentioned this, youngsters are going to define the success of South Carolina. Newcomers as well. 38 new players since the end of last season. And Shane Beamer went as far as to say that true freshmen will play at every single position this season. So my question is this: which youngsters and newcomers, whether it be true freshmen, the portal, what have you, which of those players emerge ahead of kickoff? See, you got to be careful and take most things, I would say, with a grain of salt coming out of fall camp, right? Because everybody's 0-0. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's good right now. Nobody's going to come out and say we're going 4-8, 3-9, 5-7. Nobody's going to come out and say that. Everybody feels great about their team. It's best shape of my life season. Beware of that. But at the same time, I think if you read between the lines and you listen closely, you can sort of tell who your breakout guys are going to be, or who's shining at fall camp, who may make a bigger impact than you're expecting. I mean, I recall specifically 2 years ago, it was Juju McDowell. And this was at a time that, of course, former Gamecocks quarterback Connor Shaw was still involved with the program. And, you know, somebody heard from somebody, heard through the grapevine, whatever. But it was Connor Shaw specifically speaking on, hey, This Juju McDowell guy, he's the best player on our offense. And you hear something like that from a source like that, and it makes you stop and think, okay, there might be something to this. Last year I heard a lot about Juice Wells, of course. I mean, that was the big headline, the storyline on the offensive side of the football, the normal chatter around Spencer Rattler, what have you. But there are so many youngsters, so many new guys. I mean, guys, you think about it. And guys that weren't on the roster in the spring. Dontavius Braswell at running back. Nicholas Harbor on the outside. How quickly is he coming along? You think of the offensive line, Trovon Bowe, Marquis Anderson, some others as well, Big Tree Bobolade, right? Guys that South Carolina, you don't want to have to play them, but the more you can get out of them, the merrier you are, right? You look at the tight end position, as new as that room is, Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, a guy they raved about in the spring, Nick Elskness as well. Connor Cox is in that room. Defensive side, I already mentioned Jerron Willis at the linebacker position. How about a Grayson Puff Howard as a true freshman? How about a Desmond Umeozulu on the edge? How about a Jatius Gear on the edge? How about young guys in the secondary? Jelon Kilgore is one that I know fans are excited about. So, we heard about Nick Emmanwori in the preseason as well last year. So, paying close attention, reading between the lines, you got a lot of youngsters that need to play impactful football immediately. And their progression, their development over the course of the next couple of weeks is going to go a long way in how South Carolina fares this season. And finally, guys, the final storyline, the final thing that I'm most paying attention to during fall camp is, nothing on the field, more so just the hype, the hoopla, and the high expectations that are inevitably surrounding year 3 of Shane Beamer. And does that change anything necessarily? And when I say high expectations, Gamecock fans always have high expectations, but I think there are now real expectations on South Carolina to make noise this year. You're picked third by the media in the SEC East at SEC Media Days. You're starting to see people pick 8 wins. Some are daring as far as 9 wins. I saw a 10-win projection today. Granted, that came from a Gamecock fan. Either way, though, I think there's a level of pressure and expectations that South Carolina has not felt in the first 2 years under Shane Beamer. And as we all know, pressure is a beautiful thing. Pressure is a privilege. Pressure makes diamonds. But how does South Carolina handle that? Do they use that to their advantage? Is it something where, they're able to use it to fuel them? Do they really block out the outside noise? We know they pay attention to it. Heck, we heard Coach Beamer over the summer talking about, hey, way too early spread on the Georgia game was 26. And he mentioned, yeah, I saw it. It's something I bring up. So, they hear the chatter. They hear the noise. They feel the pressure and the expectations. And especially, guys, when you talk pressure, leading up to, it's not like you have all due respect, an EIU or even a Georgia State to kind of ease into your season. You don't have a couple of cupcakes first 3 or 4 games. You got North Carolina, who's a legitimate Power 5 team, a legitimately good ACC team, a preseason top 25 team, going to be a top 25 showdown in Charlotte. How does that change this preseason, if at all? Does it put any more pressure on it? Does that help South Carolina? So I think high expectations in year 3 of Shane Beamer are going to be fascinating to follow all throughout fall camp. And it should be a great time as South Carolina prepares for kickoff against the North Carolina Tar Heels. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling and get our good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, on the show. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars, That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie Ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, July the 31st. Again, appreciate you all tuning in. We do have our good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, upcoming at 1:15. We'll talk all things, of course, college football, Gamecocks, SEC, everything in between. In the meantime, guys, again, we're continuing the conversation, keeping it rolling as South Carolina's fall camp officially begins. Looking forward to it. Again, really excited, guys. Q&A Power Hour. Don't forget, upcoming in our third hour, you have any questions, comments, calls you want to submit for the show, be sure to head over or call in 843-790-3377. You can give us a ring there and we'll get to you. Or you can text that number or just wait until the third hour and give us a ring and we'll have a great conversation today in that third hour. Like I mentioned, we keep the conversation rolling. Fall camp gets underway on Friday. What are the top position battles to watch for during fall camp? As I mentioned previously, Can you necessarily draw conclusions from what you hear from the coaches and the players speaking? Maybe not, but I think you can read between the lines. And either way, I think there are some position battles, some huge position battles that will take place this fall that are going to shape South Carolina's success in this 2023 season. And we start with the most obvious. We talked running back last week in our position unit preview series. That is the top position battle to watch for as the Gamecocks begin fall camp on Friday. And while I project Dakereon Joyner to be RB1 and to be the starting running back when South Carolina takes on UNC, there is no doubt it is a battle all fall camp long to figure out just how this thing shakes out. Is there a true RB1? Is it a running back by committee? How much does each guy factor in? Dakereon Joyner versus Juju McDowell versus Mario Anderson versus Dontavius Braswell. Guys, I feel like this position battle is as open as any out there. And when I say open, again, will Dakereon Joyner trot out there first against UNC? I think so. But we all know it doesn't stop there. Like, what is this room? How does this room shake out? What percentage of carries does each guy get? Like, are you able to learn anything about this running back group? Are there answers that you can find in this running back room? Does a guy like Dontavius Braswell burst on the scene and take over and fight for carries and maybe, just maybe, fight for that RB1 spot? Does a guy like Juju McDowell show that while he's a scat back and he's not a in between the tackles guy, that he can still be a weapon in this offense? Or does a guy like Mario Anderson burst on the scene and show, hey, just because I was a former D2 guy, these stats still play. I've been an RB1 before. I've carried a football team on my back, and I'm ready to do it again. And then, of course, Dakereon Joyner, guys. I mean, does he show that this move to the running back position was one that should have happened years ago, and this is a natural fit, and he takes over as the leader in that room? Again, I think it goes so far beyond even just the battle for the RB1 spot, the overall competition in the room and how the running back group shakes out, how South Carolina, like what I think a lot of it's going to determine what they're going to do in the running back room. Again, more by committee, RB1 leading the way. Going to be fascinating to follow that position battle as fall camp progresses. Guys, I'm also looking on the outside, and listen, some of you will disagree with this, but I think there's a battle at wide receiver too between Xavier Legette and Eddie Lewis. And I could even just phrase this as your second option on the offensive side, right? Your second playmaker, your second go-to guy. Because we all know there's no debate. It is Juice Wells as the go-to guy on this offense. But after that, who is it? And at the wide receiver position specifically, I know that everyone's ready to hand over wide receiver 2 to Xavier Legette. But you take a look at Eddie Lewis, guys. Legette versus Eddie Lewis, I think there's a battle there. And you look at his statistics at Memphis. In 2 seasons, had 62 catches for 945 yards and 10 touchdowns. Last season, specifically, he was a 40-catch guy. 596 yards and 6 touchdowns for them a season ago. Was also really good in the return game. Had 27 punt returns, 255 yards, and a touchdown, a long of 60. And here's my thing. We'll get into this a lot more beginning tomorrow when we talk Gamecocks wide receivers in our position unit preview series when we break this thing down. I like Xavier Legette. I'm optimistic that Xavier Legette can take that next step and be that dude that everyone seems to act like he already is. I mean, the hype around Xavier Legette right now is at an all-time high. But guys, I think it's been 3 separate occasions, 3 separate off seasons that I have listed Xavier Legette as my quote-unquote breakout player, as the guy that I thought was going to burst on the scene and be the next dude at the wide receiver position. And it just hasn't happened. Whether it be a case of the drops, whether it be injuries, whether it be getting buried in the depth chart, whatever the reason has been, Xavier Legette's a guy that he looks like he should be that guy. I mean, he impresses you the second he steps off the bus. He's got the measurables. He's done it before end of season. But I don't think you bring a guy like Eddie Lewis in if there isn't a battle. The way that Eddie Lewis, guys, was targeted in the spring game, I know it was the spring game. But the way that Eddie Lewis was targeted it reminded me very similarly of how Juice Wells was targeted in the 2022 spring game. I'm just saying, Xavier Legette very well may be the second option of the offense, may have the best season of his career by far. But I think there's a battle there for sure. And listen, iron sharpens iron. Great to have that battle on the outside because it's only going to make those two players better. But I think to just sit here and say, Xavier Legette, he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. He's got that wide receiver 2 spot locked up. I ain't buying it, man. And until I see it, I'm not buying it. I think there's a real battle there, between Xavier Legette and Eddie Lewis for that wide receiver 2 spot. And finally, guys, I go to the defensive side, the weak side linebacker position. So I had to specify, right? Because there's a middle linebacker and a weak side linebacker. And all it specifies is what side of the field you're on versus where the tight end is, what have you. So you're on the side that the tight end is not, okay? So the weak side linebacker doesn't mean you're weak, just means it's the weak side linebacker. I want to clarify that, obviously. Debo Williams, who I think is going to be the day one starter, projecting right now, but there's a youngster named Grayson Pup Howard that I'm projecting will have a big-time season. And I think it's only a matter of time before he takes his starting spot. I really do. And that's no knock on Debo Williams, but I just do not think he's got the talent that a guy like Pup Howard has. How quickly is Pup Howard able to scratch the starting lineup? How quickly is Pup Howard able to insert his name into the rotation and get serious reps? You don't want to put too much on a freshman too quickly, but Pup Howard's a guy, I think, again, with the upside, with the talent, with the size, the speed. I mean, we saw the pictures from Media Day. This is a grown man waiting in the wings. I think that's going to be a fun battle to watch. I think Mo Kaba and Stone Blanton have the middle linebacker position secured. I think Jerron Willis figures somewhere in here as well. But I think the battle between Debo Williams and Grayson Pup Howard is one that's going to be fascinating. Of course, guys, that's a very important position, as we just talked about a bit earlier, in regards to the linebacking core, having a solid fall and being prepared to have their best season that they've had in quite some time. Debo Williams, Grayson Pup Howard, again, another iron sharpens iron scenario. I think that one's going to be really fun to follow. Are we hearing a lot of things about Grayson Pup Howard coming out of fall camp? Now, I want to say this really quick on a side note. You might hear one position battle that I did not mention was Nicholas Harbor fighting for reps. And I think Nicholas Harbor is going to be a factor this season. I've mentioned this before. I think he's going to be a factor. But I think learning the nuances of the wide receiver position, adjusting to the speed of the game, he's a track guy first, I think. He's still a football guy, but he's a track guy. There might be an adjustment period. So I don't know that in fall camp, Nick Harbor wasn't here in the spring. I don't know he's able to come in and really steal a spot in fall camp. But I think you're going to see him get opportunities. I would not be shocked if by the midway point of the season, we're seeing a lot of Nicholas Harbor for this football team. So again, guys, my 3 position battles to watch for during fall camp. The RB1 spot, Dak Joyner, Juju McDowell, Mario Anderson, and Dontavius Braswell duking it out in that room. Who's the go-to second option at wide receiver? Xavier Legette against Eddie Lewis. And then finally, as the linebacking core looks to step up and have their best season in years in Columbia, Debo Williams against Grayson Pup Howard at the weak linebacker spot. All are going to be fun to watch throughout fall camp. Guys, let's jump into another quick break. On the other side, we'll get my good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, on as we talk all things SEC, Gamecocks, and everything in between. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, July the 31st, 2023. I want to say I'm sure you guys noticed the new display in the studio, 2023 Beamer Ball to the Moon Tour. This shirt available over at tsus.store or the spursupshow.com. And be sure to check back with all of our merchandise, guys. We are constantly adding new products. We should be getting hats in, dare I say, by the end of the week, within the next week or so, week and a half. All those, by the way, who ordered tumblers, those orders are going out soon as well. We got tons of new products, guys, we got in the works. So, again, really, really excited. This shirt, many more available over at tsus.store or the spursupshow.com. Again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Really excited to get into your questions, your comments, your calls in hour number 3. Looking forward to all the great conversation. In just a moment, we'll have my good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, on the show as we talk all things, of course, South Carolina, SEC, college football as a whole here on this Monday. So, again, thank you all so much. I hope you had a great weekend, by the way. Really, truly. It's been a scorcher up here in the upstate. I have to imagine what it's felt like in Columbia. I can't even fathom it. But you just know kickoff is close when you've got the hot weather in the state of South Carolina, and you can kind of feel it, right, as we flip the calendar from July to August. And we love the month of August because there's football in August. Heck, we've got the Hall of Fame game on Thursday for you football sickos out there that just need to get your fix already. You can do so. All right, that being said, speaking of football sickos, somebody who loves college football more than you and I for sure, it's Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. He jumps on. Mark, what's going on, my friend? How are you? I say sicko, by the way, in a complimentary way. I'm right there with you.
Oh, absolutely. A much complimentary way, much like I call a lot of the folks that follow us at the Voice of College Football knuckleheads.
Knuckleheads.
Yes.
Okay. That sounds like an honor. Yeah, that sounds like an honor to be a knucklehead.
Yes.
I love that. Mark, first thing, of course, we're going to get into SEC, Gamecocks specifically, but you were at Big Ten Media Days, my friend. How was that? I know there were a lot of storylines there, but I think Penn State's a team that could be a college football playoff contender. You have the usual suspects in like Ohio State, Michigan, with not just what they're doing on the field, but the Harbaugh stuff, the possible 4-game suspension that it sounds like he will get. Just talk about how you enjoyed yourself at Big Ten Media Days.
Big Ten Media Days, fun time. I had never been to Lucas Oil Stadium before. I had not been to Indianapolis in like 25 years since covering an NCAA tournament there. So good time in Indy. Great facility, football field, plenty of room, plenty of space to do your thing and talk to all the coaches and players. The side sessions are the place to be, where you get a little bit more candor and you've got more time to talk to the coaches. You mentioned the Harbaugh situation. It was funny because he even took it in his I cannot comment. I'm not allowed to comment. I would like to comment. I would love to tell you everything. Of course, he said that. I would love to be able to tell you everything because I'm not ashamed. I didn't do anything wrong, but I cannot tell you anything. You know, even those football related questions that relate to that, like how are you going to organize your staff when you're gone? Those sorts of things. Cannot even answer that. I asked Harbaugh, I said, 2 years ago, you were in this exact place, in this exact location, and you said, we are going to beat Ohio State or I'm going to die trying. And I said, you know, how close did you think at that statement to dying? Because how confident were you that you were going to be able to pull that off? And he just kind of laughed and said, well, fortunately, I don't have to answer that question. I don't have to be truthful because we did it.
I love it. It's going to be really interesting. What are your overall thoughts just on that Harbaugh situation? I mean, it's you know, it's the NCAA makes it up as they go along. We all know that. But after the Tennessee situation and kind of the slap on the wrist they got, you know, a 4-game suspension feels pretty serious. Now, Michigan's going to win those games. I mean, they play nobody to start the season. They're going to be at minimum 2 touchdown favorites in every single one of those games. But I mean, your overall thoughts on the NCAA, I guess, kind of trying to send a message to Jim Harbaugh and college football as a whole?
Well, in terms of I think the NCAA gets most offended by being put in their place, meaning that Harbaugh did all these things, and had he cooperated with the NCAA, I believe that the suspension may not even exist. It might have just gone to some kind of probationary status. Can't remember the term right now, but just where they're basically watching the program for the next year or two, that sort of thing. But Jim Harbaugh didn't cooperate. He blew off the NCAA. He made fun of the whole process, made fun of the investigation. And so they kind of put him in his place. I believe more for that, for the lack of cooperation, for then what he actually did and allowed. So that's part of it right there. Now, in terms of him missing the 4 games, this is where some of my questions were not answered. Because the 4 games, Michigan, if they don't win all those, then they're not the Michigan team we think they are, and they're going to be irrelevant this year. So they're going to beat 4 awful teams with no problem, regardless of you. You and I can make the morning flight on those Saturdays to Ann Arbor and point out plays on the play sheet and they run them and we still win by 40. So that's not an issue. But is Harbaugh going to be allowed to be involved with the team, coaching the team actively during that month? Because that's a long time, a month of the season. He could be completely separated from the team. That, I believe, could have an impact down the road.
Now, this time of year, Mark Rogers, of course, college football realignment. I feel like that transfer portal, those are the things, NIL, what we kind of now spend the summer months talking about. But we've got real news when it comes to realignment is Colorado is headed back to the Big 12. There's also been some rumblings over the weekend that maybe schools like Clemson could be headed to the Big 10. What's the latest on college football realignment and your thoughts on Deion and the Buffaloes going back to the Big 12?
Yeah, so we'll start out west. Colorado goes back to the Big 12. I find it amusing. Again, nobody can ever be factual and tell the truth and be upfront about why you make a move as a university or a football program, because they cited a bunch of things that have absolutely nothing to do with either being in the Pac-12 or the Big 12. They cited, our care for the student athletes and their travel, the hardships of travel as an athlete and those sorts of. Well, they made the decision to go to the Pac-12 anyway. This is all about money, and it's about exposure, and it's about a lifeboat, a life preserver for Colorado if the rest of the league implodes. So they made the move that they did, and that's the deal with Colorado. Now the Pac-12 is teetering on the same place that basically the Big 12 was a couple of years ago before they made the additions of BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF, that they're at that number where, and hopefully I'm still on.
No idea what just happened there. Here we go. Let's see.
There we go. I didn't see you, but I saw me, so I kept going. But here we go. We'll backtrack.
The platform we stream on just completely restarted or something. I don't know what happened. Muschamp Hackers. Either way, my friend, I apologize. You were talking about Colorado not being transparent about why they wanted to make that transition, obviously.
Yeah, they're moving for 3 reasons. They're going to make more money. They are going to get the exposure that they want. They tried the Pac-12. They discovered, much like Nebraska's, that the recruiting is not a fit for them. They need to get back to Texas and those places and make a connection there. And then number 3, they got a life preserver. So they're going the safe route. They're going to stay within college football and not be on a sinking ship. Now, the Pac-12, their situation is, from a number standpoint, mighty close to what the Big 12 was suffering 2 seasons ago, where once you get to that 7 or 8 line in terms of number of schools, then you better act and bring people on board, or you're going to crumble, because out of those 7 or 8 that are left, you can be sure that they're talking about and they're weighing their options and they're making those connections with other conferences to find safety. So the Big 12 saved themselves by making the 4 additions right after they lost Oklahoma and Texas. The Pac-12, unfortunately for them, they should be approaching it the same way. However, they've got far less options than what the Big 12 had 2 years ago. So good luck to the Pac-12, because if Oregon and Washington, they're the best football schools. You could throw Utah in there as well. But these rumors about Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, then basically those schools that are left, they're probably going to try to hook up with the Mountain West just to survive. And then you brought up Florida State. I find them, in a sense, the most intriguing because they have spearheaded this conversation. They have been active. Their athletic director, Mike Alford, made a statement to the Board of Trustees 4 or 5 months ago, and then to the media, that day one, when he took the job roughly 2 years ago, he instantly started seeking out legal advice to get out the grant of rights, hired lawyers, hired a consulting firm, a research firm, went the full route to say, this is not working. We cannot sustain a bid to win championships here if we stay in the ACC. So we're going to do our homework and look to get out. And they have been the forerunner of this. Now it's going to be interesting. I'm pretty convinced that they're going to be able to pull this off at some point. I don't know that it's going to happen in the next few months. But it may be a 2 or 3 year process, but things are moving so quickly now. I would not count against it. But whether they bring Clemson with them or Miami or both, whether they go SEC, whether they go Big Ten, there's no doubt the cultural fit and the logical rivalries that feel right are in the SEC, of course, but there are some financial reasons to go to the Big Ten. That's a slightly better situation, but I don't know that that's significant. So that the way that shakes out is going to be fascinating and going to change everything.
I mean, Mark, it definitely feels like we're on the way to 3 mega conferences, and the Pac-12 and the ACC, especially the Pac-12, are in some serious trouble. I mean, I know the Pac-12s, they still don't have their media deal they were working on for forever. I mean, and there's just teams, like you mentioned, just up and leaving left and right. I don't know, man. I mean, it doesn't feel like the Pac-12 is going to be around much longer, which is a shame for, again, I mentioned the college football sickos, but just us diehard college football fans that, you get done watching the East Coast game and it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock and you turn on the TV and there's Southern Cal and Washington. There's Arizona State, Arizona. There's those West Coast games to entertain us. And I don't know, man. From the outside looking in, I'm not going to pretend like I'm close to the situation, but it feels like, Mark, how would you quantify how much trouble is the Pac-12 really in?
The Pac-12 has gone from like a 60 or 70% survival rate a couple weeks ago, especially when they were talking San Diego State and they were close to that deal. And that looked like that was going to be an addition that would in no way replace USC and UCLA, but at least fill that void geographically. And it's an up and coming school from a football standpoint. They've gone from 75% survival rate to a true Pac-12 or Pac-10. I think we're down to 25%. Those schools will still play football somewhere, of course, but it could be some kind of merge with the Mountain West. It could be Stanford. I don't know that a lot of people talk about Stanford, but the school is right in line with what the Big Ten would love. And I can see Stanford and Cal going to the Big Ten as well.
Mark, fall camp is on the horizon. Some teams have already taken the field. Football is back, my friend. And I actually was, gazing at you guys' YouTube page and some of the content, Mark, you've been doing. And you've been doing some fall camp previews, offense, defense, what have you, from the national college football scope. But there's a couple of things. Fall camp's one of those times where you sort of have to read between the lines. I mean, there are intriguing position battles to watch at certain schools, but you're probably not going to hear a ton, but I think you can learn some things if you pay close enough attention. Is there anything that jumps out to you top of mind that when it comes to fall camp, you're most paying attention to in the grand scope of college football?
The quarterback battles are always interesting, and they're out there, certainly among some really good teams. So you've got both quarterback battles, and then you also have inexperienced, talented quarterbacks at programs that are supposed to succeed. Ohio State and Penn State have 5-star quarterbacks, but they're completely inexperienced. Alabama's got this situation where, man, if Alabama pulls through the typical 11-1 season, goes to the championship game, wins or loses, goes to the playoffs, regardless, if they end up in the playoff, considering the quarterback situation that they currently have, then my respect level for Nick Saban, which I would think can't be any higher than it is now, is just going to go to some deity kind of place because I'm not sold on their quarterback play. These guys were not good when they had the opportunity. I think they're going to be able to mask that, massage that to a certain extent, but at some point, whoever wins that quarterback job for Alabama is going to have to bring a team down the field down by 4 with 90 seconds left in the game, or going to have to deliver like a 300-yard passing game against Georgia to win a conference championship, or against the Tennessee to maintain the record, or an LSU to get into the playoff. They can't. This is not Greg McElroy's 2009 Alabama team that can throw 11 passes in the BCS championship game.
Mark, I'm not sure I've asked you this yet, and I'm going to put you on the spot. So if you haven't, who's your college football playoff? Do you think it's as simple as Georgia? I mean, if I asked you, are you taking Georgia or the field? What are you going with? I mean, do you have a 4 right now, or is that something you don't do until we get closer to the season?
I don't have a 4.
Okay.
I basically weighing. We've talked about this in various versions over the many months about trying to find that team or those teams that are going to break through. It's so easy to default Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. I think they have the best odds in a sense. I could see that playing out, but I really want to figure out the Clemson, Florida State dynamic. That is, to me, the most certain conference championship game. Texas, for as little as I believe in Sark, he's got to prove to me that he can really pull through with the team. I do believe that that is the best team in any conference compared to the rest of the conference. I think they have the best and biggest talent gap over everybody else. So, yeah, I would bet the field against Georgia for a national championship just because I understand odds. But I do believe that Georgia is the surest thing out there. And the Big Ten is fascinating because a lot of people love Penn State to break through. Michigan's the safest choice, but Ohio State is still the most talented roster in that conference. And the Bama LSU matchup is going to be huge. Of course, Bama's got that at home, and that should decide the West.
And as you mentioned, Mark, I think what's a really fascinating conversation, this time of year over the summer, we see the blue chip ratio, right? Teams that can realistically compete for and win a national championship specifically. And I feel like that list, looking at this season, it's probably 6 or 7 teams long. I mean, I think from the SEC, and you can correct me if I'm wrong along the way, I think from the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, those are your realistic national title contenders. I think in the ACC, Florida State and Clemson, I think those two. I think out of the Big 12, like you mentioned, I think Texas, they've got a lot to prove, but that roster's loaded. Out of the Big 10, Ohio State, Michigan, so that gives us 8. And I think you go to the Pac-12, Southern Cal. I mean, do we want to include them in that? So 9, would you include Southern? I think they're a fringe team because line of scrimmage, they've got Caleb Williams, sure, but, when you get to the playoff, the trenches is what's really exposed. Would you say it's less or more than those teams I just mentioned in regards to teams that can realistically win the national championship this year?
Win the national championship.
Win the national title.
I wish that you were right. I wish I could go in your direction. The difference, and I emphasize this to people all the time, the difference between making the playoff and winning the national championship is catastrophic. There are 18 or 20 teams that can make the playoff. There might be more than that if we really wanted to go through it. But the 2 games that you have to win, unless you play in the SEC or those 3 or 4 key games in the Big Ten, unless you play those kind of games in the regular season, you are facing a larger climb for that 10-day period to win 2 games than you did the entire season. All credit to TCU. They faced a completely different deal when they went to the playoff, and we've seen this over and over and over out of the likes of good teams, Michigan State, Washington, etc., that make the playoff. But once you get there, who do I truly believe that could win a national championship? You mentioned Florida State and USC. I wouldn't be stunned if you said today one of those 2 won a national championship, but I would be a bit surprised because I just don't think that they have it top to bottom roster depth, top end talent. I think the top end talent goes, I don't even know if Michigan, I piss a lot of people off by making this statement, win a freaking playoff game. I don't know that they've got a tremendous, and they beat Ohio State the last 2 years. So I don't want to take that away from them, but there's just a difference in caliber that gets ratcheted up when they reach the playoffs. And we've only seen Ohio State be able to elevate on a consistent basis to not necessarily win those games, but win some of them and compete. So for me, it's Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, Ohio State can win a national championship. Michigan, Florida State, USC on the fringe.
So Clemson, it sounds like, is your pick in the ACC then. Would you say that, because we had my good buddy Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate on last week, and admittedly he's a Gator grad, but I mean, he talks about this thing objectively. He thinks Florida State's one of the most overrated teams in college football into the season. Do you feel that way as well? And do you think Clemson should be the favorite to win the ACC?
I'll put it this way. I don't know if Florida State's one of the most overrated, but they quite possibly could be. They proved that they're decent this is what they proved last year by beating the Georgia Techs and Boston Colleges down the stretch. They won 6 games in a row to finish the season. Big deal. Half of the country would have won those 6 games. The best team that they beat was probably Florida. A 6-7 Florida team was the best team that they beat in that 6-game stretch. I know 3 people are throwing out LSU. That was game 1. I'm talking about winning 6 consecutive games. Before that, they lost to Clemson, who got murdered by Notre Dame, and Tennessee and South Carolina. They lost to Wake Forest. They lost to NC State. These are good teams, but they're nowhere close to the top. They lost to 5 and 6 lost teams. And they beat 6 teams down the stretch who are horrible. So it's a nice story. Mike Norvell, I think, is doing a nice job. But that LSU game is going to be fascinating because if they beat LSU again, this is a different LSU squad than what they faced last year. LSU is elevated. Florida State's elevated. So it was an even matchup last year, but now it's an even matchup up here. So, yeah, I'm not necessarily sold on Florida State, but I will say this, that I'm still weighing whether I'm going to pick them to win the conference, but I'll make the comparison between Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan's got an easier schedule. They play Ohio State at home. They've got less questions. Like every positional unit is rock solid on Michigan. Ohio State's got questions all over the place, but Ohio State is better equipped to win a national championship. And I think that might be the case in the ACC. That Clemson, I would give them much more odds to win a national championship getting into a playoff.
Now, Mark, you and I have not spoke since SEC Media Days took place in Nashville. We actually have spoke on your show, but not on these airwaves. So, I'm curious, specifically bringing this all back to the Gamecocks, your thought on what Shane Beamer had to say, if anything stood out to you. And then just SEC Media Days as a whole. I felt like it was, somewhat subdued to years past. We didn't have a Jimbo versus Saban feud. We didn't have anybody asking a player if they're a virgin or not, like Tim Tebow got asked back in 2007. But again, if you read between the lines, I think there were some interesting takeaways from things that all the coaches had to say. Your just overall thoughts on the event that took place in Nashville.
Yeah, well, at this point, with the news cycle being what it is, that seems like it was like 8 months ago. So let's see, back to SEC Media Days. Well, I still think that Shane Beamer's in a honeymoon period, but I think this is the last year of the honeymoon where he can kind of get away with anything. Not that anyone's going to question if they go 6-6 that he may not be the right guy for the job, but I do think that he's got a ton of equity. Combining the recruiting efforts, the personality, and then the winning on the field against a rival, especially, and against Tennessee. So, man, he won 2 games last year that this program has not won since Steve Spurrier walked off the field. Those kind of games, against high leverage opponents. So that bought him a lot and proved to me a lot about truly how good he is. I hate to give credit to your rival, but Dabo Swinney was kind of the first of the new style coach that could be kind of gregarious and do some crazy things and be fun and be one of the guys and still maintain the authority in the locker room that he's the man, but still mess around with the players, have fun, dance, do those sorts of things. He was kind of at the cutting edge of that, but Shane Beamer's got that down to a T.
Finally, Mark Rogers, voice of college football. Mark, I appreciate you taking the time. I got to get your thoughts on this, man. As we sit here and we count down the days, we're about to flip the calendar to August. And I'm someone, I love the spreads. I love talking gambling, the Vegas side of things. Not that it, we've seen South Carolina, I believe 7 of Shane Beamer's 15 wins at South Carolina came as the underdog. So if there's anybody who does not care what the spread is and is great at defying the odds, it is Shane Beamer. But, Mark, I just think it's fascinating that when I look at this season opener against North Carolina, maybe I'm not looking at the right people, but I have not seen anyone pick the Tar Heels to win this game. Everyone that I've seen is going South Carolina, SEC over ACC, no big deal. Yet the Vegas spread, the money is coming in on the Tar Heels. They served as a 1-point favorite, then 1.5. Now they're a 3-point favorite, Mark. I mean, what do you make of it? I know you're not a huge gambling guy, but like, what do you make of that? Because to me, it feels like a sucker bet. Like, it's almost like Vegas wants you to take South Carolina. Like, what do you make of the line shifting in favor of UNC? Is it just the continued Drake May love? Do they know something we don't know? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you hit it late. Drake May, Vegas loves, and Vegas knows and understands the betting public. They understand what they like and what grabs their attention. What grabs their attention are great quarterbacks, high scoring offenses, all of that. The Minnesotas of the world don't get a whole lot of love, but they go out there and win 9 games a season, and they look really ugly doing that. And Minnesota's playing North Carolina this year. They'll probably go down there as like a 12 or 14-point underdog. And I will say, take Minnesota now, because this North Carolina outfit, they're just thin, and until proven otherwise, yes, go through history and line up comparable SEC versus anybody, but especially ACC matchups. And it's not guaranteed. Nothing is, but it's a heavy lean. I bet if you took every point spread under a touchdown between the SEC and the ACC in the last 10 years, you'd have a 75-25 proposition SEC.
Mark, last thing, actually, if South Carolina beats North Carolina, I think it will, based off what you're saying. And again, folks I've talked to, if the Gamecocks beat North Carolina, it's kind of like, okay, business as usual. They should have won. Let's just play the hypothetical game. If South Carolina were to lose that one, as well as I do, you come on this show, you're on social media, expectations, year 3 of Shane Beamer. The expectations are very high in Columbia. If you lose to UNC, how does that all of a sudden shake up those expectations? What does it then do? Because the path will only get more difficult for South Carolina from that point.
Well, it's one of those 50-50 games. And even though I'm not playing it out to be a 50-50 game, it's still in that range. I think it's more like 60-65 on South Carolina's side. But it's generally, Vegas is saying, a North Carolina 55-45 kind of game. So you've lost whatever you've charted. And I know you examine this season a number of different ways and really lay it out for everyone. You've charted probably 3 to 4 games that are 50-50. Well, that's one of them right there. And that's the first one of the season. And one of the things that you nailed last year was not just record, but trajectory of season and the tipping point in terms of confidence, momentum, the way Beamer and his staff would approach it with red shirts and everything, and considering this, okay, this is a salvageable season, this is a breakthrough season, or hey, let's cut our losses, move on to next season. And they flipped the switch at the right time and kicked it into gear after that dismal Missouri performance. And you hate to call game 1 something like that, but it's a pivotal game in regards to South Carolina having the kind of season that we expect the ceiling to be, which is not competing with Georgia, but 9-3, really good bowl game versus 6-6.
Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, joins us every single Monday. Mark, and let me say this. Thank you so much, my friend, for taking the time. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all college football season, and also not just Gamecocks, but, of course, your perspective on SEC, the national landscape. It's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for keeping us informed. Our audience appreciates it. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Always a good time, Chris.
Yeah, Mark. Talk soon. Appreciate you. Great stuff, guys. Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, again, joins us every single Monday. Really appreciate the hard work that Mark puts in this thing. And again, they have great content over at the voice of college football on YouTube. I've appeared on there a time or two. It's really, really good stuff. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break, but on the other side, hey, we're getting to our Q&A Power Hour. I want to hear from each and every single one of you, your questions, your comments, your calls, and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, are back here on this Monday, July the 31st, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. With that being said, first I want to say thank you to Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Really appreciate him taking the time, guys. In case you missed it, if you can't tell, I should say, I am fired up to be talking with you all on this Monday. Number one, because I'm grateful to be doing so. Number two, because we are closing the book on the month of July. The camera's losing it. It's going crazy. It doesn't know how to act right now. We are closing the book, though, on the month of July. August is upon us, which means kickoff is near. Cannot freaking wait, man. Going to be a lot of fun. Again, 843-790-3377. I want to hear from each and every single one of you. Let's get into these YouTube questions in the meantime. Let's see. Jonathan Lee, we got Lang. Do we know if we got anybody else, or did we help our chances on players we need? Stewart, Hill, even Paler. Again, we'll have JC Sherbert on tomorrow to break down everything from the cookout weekend. It sounds like things are going well with Dylan Stewart. It's just a waiting game. Daniel Hill will announce in the month of August. Sounds like things are going well with him. I'd expect Jonathan Paler to pick NC State based off what we've heard. We'll see if that changes. Again, just based off what I've heard the latest, I think Paler is NC State bound, which, yes, it is a swing and miss, but it is what it is. Welcome to the recruiting game at NIL. Zymairian Lang, I think, was a much-needed hit after a couple misses for South Carolina. And, again, a big add as well for the Gamecocks. And, I'll say this not to start on a negative note, but it's not negative, but it's just, I see the people, and I simply tweeted, I was just surprised there were no welcome homes over the weekend from Shane Beamer. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. It's not like throwing jabs or throwing shade or being negative. It's just I was just surprised there wasn't a welcome home of any sort. And, I think the reaction to me saying that is not because people are mad at me in any way. I think people are frustrated with recruiting. I think that's honestly what it comes down to. You're seeing Tennessee pick up recruits left and right, LSU, Clemson. They're just stocking up. In Carolina, it's been kind of a slow summer. So I think the momentum will find its way back in Columbia. I think South Carolina will get it rolling yet again. You pick up a Stewart, you pick up a Hill. All of a sudden, guys, hey, your overall player rating is, I think, top 10 in the country right now at like a 90.6 something. So I think you're fine. I think you're in solid standing, but, there's been some momentum lost, and I think that's wearing on people. And so, listen, I don't take any of the shots people take at me on Twitter personally. I think it's just people use TSUS as a means of venting their frustration, and we'll always be here for that. But I would say this. I simply just said I was surprised there were no welcome homes. Doesn't mean recruiting isn't on a great trajectory. I mean, if there's one thing under Shane Beamer that I think you can feel good about will be taken care of without your worrying, it's recruiting. So we will, if Carolina is outside the top 25 in December, I think that's more reason to chatter, more reason to be concerned. Right now, you're still over the number for the blue chip ratio. You're still at a point where your average per recruit is really high. So, but it's been an interesting summer to say the least, no doubt. Stephanie Lee, back from your cruise. What's going on? Appreciate you tuning in. Arthur Bear, Lang's 40 time is 4.31. Yeah, you want some, you definitely want some guys that are speed demons like that, Arthur Bear. No doubt. No doubt indeed. You want some guys like that. Arthur Bear also says year in, year out, Kentucky has a trash non-conference schedule, and it's easier for them to get to 8 or 9 wins. I mean, it is their schedule, their front half of their schedule is laughable. It is. Them and Mizzou both do that, though. So, Austin Gregory, big game boomer, ranks Loggins and White as the 39th best coordinator doing college football. Hope to see that number jump next year. I mean, yeah, Austin, I just think the question marks around Dabble Loggins, I mean, they are real. I mean, whether you want to believe it or not, they are real. And then Clayton White, I think, is probably a top 25 defensive coordinator, but, even Coach White's got some questions as well. So I think 39th is fair. I mean, BGB's in the list business. That's fine, but I think it's fair. Austin Gregory drops a bomb, says Landon Duckworth is getting a commitment video ready. Expect him to announce in the next couple of days. Landon Duckworth is a quarterback in the 2026 cycle. DGD, what's going on, man? Excited. We'll be talking with DGD late tonight about all things Gamecocks football. Looking forward to chatting with my guy DGD on his airwaves. Arthur Bear on the Kentucky note says, we feel that way because we out-recruit them every year. We should beat them every year. The talent on South Carolina's roster is better. Well, Arthur Barrett did not happen for quite some time, my guy. It did not happen for quite some time. And whether that was talent, that was development, a mixture of the two, Mark Stoops has had his way with Carolina, it seems. Over the last decade, let me clarify, which is relevant, by the way. It is relevant, but South Carolina has split 2-2 in the last 4. So this will be a big one this year in regards to taking control of that series, I think. You got to win a couple in a row against Kentucky to swing that thing back in your favor, in my opinion. So let's see. Jacob E says the reality is that UK has just had a better program since Spurrier's final days. Beamer appears to be moving the needle back to us. Jacob E, that's again just something that nobody wants to hear. Flat out. I mean, here's what's funny about it, Jacob E, is that like Gamecock fans think Kentucky, Missouri are below South Carolina football. Kentucky fans think Missouri and South Carolina are below. Missouri fans think Kentucky and South Carolina are below. So those 3 fan bases are very similar in that regard, I think. Truly. John Edwards simply said, I hate Kentucky. I love it. Andrew the textbook, talking season. Levi Collins said, go Cats. We got a Kentucky fan in here. What's up, man? What's going on? Carolina Titan says, Leggett is built like Casey Crosby. Now, that's a name from the past, Carolina Titan. He is somewhat kind of built like Casey Crosby. He is. That's a good comparison. Crypto says, Leggett looks clumsy in years past. Hope he does good. I don't know if clumsy is the word to describe it that I would use, but he's just, it's a guy that, again, you feel like has never really lived up to the full potential. And, maybe those final couple of games last year spark him, but it's just one of those things for me, man, where it's like, is he underrated and undervalued and he's on the cusp of breaking out? Or do we need to accept that he is who he is and he's going to be a solid receiver, but he's not going to, be 700 or 800 yards. He's just going to be kind of your 300-400 maybe yard guy, which, guys, if he hauled in 300 or 400 yards receiving this year, that'd be his best career season by far. By far. So think about the expectations on Xavier Leggett. When you think about it, I mean, I think he can be a nice second guy next to Juice Wells. I do. I'll give him that. I think he can. And again, I'm not trying to douse the Xavier Leggett hype, but I've almost been somewhat surprised the amount of hype that Xavier Leggett is getting just because we've done this before. We've done this before with Xavier Leggett. At least I have. Maybe I've just been wrong. Let's see. 76 Gamecock, what's up? Leggett looked terrific last season, particularly down the stretch. I think he sort of found himself in many ways and has the potential to be a big part of what we do this year. Again, that word, 76 Gamecock, potential. You're absolutely correct. But right now, it's potential. The biggest thing is we just need to see that go from potential to reality on the football field. He's had potential for years. He also says, with Juice Wells garnering so much attention and newcomers at tight end with Knox and Simon, Amari and Brown, Xavier Leggett, Harbor are the newcomers growing into their respective roles. Spencer might have a record year here. He could. And especially when you think about South Carolina, very well could be one-dimensional. No doubt. He could, Spencer Rattler, going to be relied on to go win some ball games and throw for a lot of yards and carry this football team, I think, at times. 76, I'm curious. I'm wondering about this Colorado experience with Deion Sanders, whether things ever truly get going just based on his health issues. Yeah, he's got that foot thing going on. Yes, Greg Bedinger in the BCC. South Carolina did lose 5 in a row to Kentucky. Since then, the Gamecocks have split the last 4. But yes, Greg, to your point, South Carolina has lost 7 of the last 9 to the Kentucky Wildcats. Again, they're 2-2 in their last 4, but they've lost 7 of the last 9. I think the last decade is relevant. If you want to, because here's why I say that. Let me explain it. Here's why I say that. If you want to talk about you own another school or we own you, we beat you all the time, beating somebody just 1 year doesn't give you that. It doesn't give you that. That honor. What's the word I'm looking? That validation. Whatever. Doesn't give you that. You can't take ownership of that. Going 3-2 over the course of 5. I mean, I guess it does maybe a little bit. Not really. You go 7-3 over the course of a decade against somebody. You own them. At that point, you own them until it changes. You go 7-3, 8-2, 9-1, whatever. You own them. I mean, that's it. 1 year is not a sample size. 2 years aren't a sample size. So that's why this year against Kentucky is so important, because all of a sudden now you can say, okay, we've won 2 in a row. We've won 3 of the last 5. You're trending in the right way to take back control in that series. You are. So, and if 5 years is relevant, Brendan, then Kentucky leads 3-2, and I really don't know what you're talking about then. So, I really don't know what you're talking about. So, hey, just saying, if South Carolina loses to Kentucky again and you've lost 8 of 10, Kentucky owns you. They own you as a program at that point. They just do, bottom line. They have full control of the series. South Carolina needs to beat Kentucky, man. They need to beat Kentucky. Let's see. We'll keep it moving. James Kendall, if Beamer can win 7 with our quarterbacks, then Saban has no excuse. I don't disagree with that. when you look at 2021, man, what a wild ride that was. 76, I absolutely hate Ohio State, but I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver in the country. Yeah, he's a damn good one, man. One of the best players in college football, no doubt. One of the best players in college football, no doubt. 76 says LSU is going to bust FSU dead in the mouth this year. Won't be any surprises this go around. Yeah, I think LSU is going to get that dub as well. I fully believe in that. Fully believe in that. Madison, game day with the Gamecocks. Indeed, Jeff Gullidge, guys, it's 105 here in Texas. Can Fall please hurry up and get here? Yeah, I had a buddy that lived in Austin. He lived in Austin. He told me it's always a scorcher there. Madison Duncan, what time are you going live after the South Carolina-North Carolina game? Madison, this will be the plan for every game, okay? And this, so, of course, for UNC as well. We will watch the game. The game will conclude. Immediately following the game, I will record my post-game reaction video, minute long, whatever, get that uploaded to social media. As soon as I'm done doing that, we're going live on the post-game call-in show. And so I'd like to think I'll say this, Madison, within 10 minutes of the game ending, my plan is to go live with the post-game call-in show. And we've actually got my guy Eric Reese right now working on a graphic specifically for a YouTube template, if you will, a thumbnail, if you will, to promote the call-in show. It'll be simply known as the Spurs Up Show post-game call-in show. We'll have like the opponent, whatever. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. The post-game call-in show is going to go crazy. I've got a feeling I'm not going to be able to keep the phone lines from ringing off the hook. I mean, truly. That's my greatest fear. You know what I mean? That's my greatest fear, that I won't be able to get to all the calls because the phone lines are going to ring off the hook. Lynn Turner, the Sims have been going, Lynn. You've been missing it. We're 2-2 right now, 1-1 in the simulations. We actually have a sim tonight, 7 o'clock, against the Tennessee Volunteers, Brendan and Dalton's favorite team. That'll be a good one. A lot of fun. Then tomorrow night, we'll do Florida, and then we'll pick it back up next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, with, Mizzou, A&M, and Jacksonville State. So it'll be a really good time. Going to be a lot of fun. Let's see. John Edward, who was the Clemson guy for the opponent preview. We're jumping back on with our friends over at Nachos and Analysis. They do a good job talking Clemson. So excited. We do have a Clemson guy again jumping on the show. That will air tomorrow. Really looking forward to the conversation. And that will wrap up our opponent preview series, believe it or not. Let's see. Justin Bryant. With having the toughest schedule in the country once again, are fans almost too harsh on this team? If we had an easier schedule, would our 7 or 8 wins maybe translate to 9 or 10, or it doesn't matter? Well, I mean, Justin, listen, I think certainly that, the toughness of South Carolina's schedule, I mean, it definitely plays a factor. You would be naive, Justin, to think that strength of schedule does not impact record projection. I mean, it's why you hear so many people say this team could be better, but have a worse record. I mean, that's something that drives people batty. It's like, how could that be possible? It doesn't make sense. But when you play in the SEC and you play some of the teams you play, that certainly factors in. It absolutely factors in. And so, Justin, to your point, people think I'm negative, doom and gloom at times, and a pessimist. I don't know, whatever. No, I keep things realistic. And for some of you, I keep them painfully realistic where it bothers you. But guys, having realistic expectations and being real about things, it's not unfair. It's not negative. You know what's unfair? You know what's unfair to Shane Beamer and South Carolina football? Picking 10-2 for the season. Expecting to win 10 games in year 3 of his tenure. Looking at all the question marks and saying, oh, well, 9-3 is our floor. That is harmful to Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks football program. That's not fair. That, my friends, is not fair. It'd be kind of like last year if I would have picked 10-2 and then Carolina goes 8-4. And because we've created this narrative that, anything less than 9-3 is not good enough, we would have looked at 8-4 as a bad season. Like, you help no one by having unfair, unrealistic expectations. So a lot of what I preach and what I talk about and, why I say, hey, first 5 years of Shane Beamer, just make bowl games. Win 6, 7, 8, whatever. Get to a nice bowl. Win your bowl game every now and then and recruit your ass off. Because I never was expecting an overnight success. I was never expecting an overnight turnaround. And I think it's unfair to Beamer and company. You're not giving enough credit to the mess they inherited, both talent-wise and culturally in the building. You're not giving enough credit to that job and what they had to do. So, listen, run wild with the optimism. Run wild with the dreams. But when you start saying things like, we got to go 10-2. We got to win 9 games at minimum or this season's a failure. Like, if we go 7-5, this season's a massive disappointment. Like, I think you're putting unfair expectations on Shane Beamer and company. I really do. I think you are. When you look at this football team and the amount of question marks they have, I'm not saying you're if you want to pick that, fine. And you feel like the questions will be answered, fine. But deeming that like, well, if we don't win 9 games, the season was a failure. We have to improve on the win total. That's a very slippery slope. That's a very dangerous line you were walking there. And so I choose not to set those unrealistic expectations. I choose to see it for what it is, not for what I hope it to be. Some things are going to work out better than we project. Others are not. And you're going to hear that in my analysis. See, that's the thing about me, guys. I'm going to give you my pick and my prediction. 7-5. I locked it in. 7-5, 4-4 in SEC play. And I'm going to spend the next 2 months explaining to you why I got to that conclusion. Bottom line. But, yeah, man, have high hopes and expectations and dreams. Just be fair in the meantime. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Because there's going to be slapdicks out there. There are going to be slapdicks that Carolina goes 7-5, and there's going to be somebody out there that set their expectations at 9 or 10 wins, and they're going to be questioning Shane Beamer after the season. It's just like, don't be that guy. Don't be that. Don't be that guy. That's where I fall. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Just saying. You got to factor that in, though, man. You have to factor that in. Anyways, let's keep it moving. Robbie Davis says, who do you think will be the vocal leader of our defense? I think it's a guy like Tonka Hemingway, Robbie. I think the top 3 guys, I'll say, there's 3 levels of the defense. I'll give you top 3 guys. Tonka Hemingway up front. I think Mo Kaba, obviously veteran guy, returns from injury. And I think in the secondary, you probably look at a Marcellus Dial. Nicky Mawari, I think, still a young player, obviously. I don't know that they're really looking at him as that dude. But I think those 3 guys on defense could be vocal leaders. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from.
Let's see. What's going on, man? How are you?
Man, I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Hey, we can barely hear you, my man. I don't know if your phone is far from your face or what's going on, but I can barely hear you in the background.
Is that better?
It's a little bit better. Yeah, it's just a little bit faint. So just make sure you're speaking to the mic. We want to hear what you have to say, obviously.
Okay, man. I appreciate you taking my call.
Yeah.
This kind of like been on my mind here lately. I know SEC is going to go to a position. Not having divisions. What do you think about? And I just want your opinion. I'm gonna hang up. What do you think about South Carolina, North Carolina being an annual game? Excuse me, like Clemson is to South Carolina. Listen to what you got to say. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the call. And again, guys, I just wanted to make sure everybody could hear his question when he asked it. South Carolina, North Carolina being an annual game with the realignment, could it happen? Would we want it to happen? I mean, I wouldn't be opposed. I think it's a really cool, natural rivalry because of, the Carolinas, the Battle of the Carolinas. I mean, I think it's, when you think about it, guys, the fact it's South Carolina, North Carolina, I'm shocked it's not a trophy game. Like, you would think there'd be some sort of, that's a big thing in college football. And I mean, if we're going to have the Barham Trophy for A&M and the Mayor's Cup for Mizzou, it only makes sense there's some sort of trophy for South Carolina, North Carolina. Just, I don't know. That surprises me that that's not the case. Let's see. God. James Kendall says, there should be an award for praying. Is it praying? Oh, there should be an award for praying for breakout performance riders who could call it the Ortray Award. Dude, Ortray Smith was another guy. Every offseason, he got all the hype in the world. And James Kittle was for some of the same reasons. Like, well, he's 6'4". He's going to be a great receiver. He caught that one touchdown pass one time. That's funny, though, man. That's hilarious. That's absolutely hilarious. Let's see. Good God. You know what? I'm just going to read this comment. This comes from Frank. I'm going to read this comment. Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina are like the ugly fat girls in the bar. They all think the other fat, ugly girls are uglier and fatter than they are. My goodness, Frank, that is one hell of an analogy. That's one hell of an analogy, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Travi, continue to work on our lines, and we will start dominating Kentucky, Mizzou. Until it happens, it's all lip service. No doubt. Austin Gregory, we could very well go undefeated at home this year. 7-0 at home, Austin. 7-0. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. I'm just trying to think about what are the biggest pitfalls on the home field. You've got your home slate. Furman's a dub. You got Mississippi State. You got Florida. Yeah, you really could. I mean, you'd have to beat Clemson. That's the big one at the end of the season. You'd have to beat Clemson. Kentucky's going to be a tricky game late. Vandy, Jacksonville State, you should handle. So it certainly could happen. It absolutely could happen. It could. I think Clemson's obviously the biggest pitfall in that, no doubt. No doubt. Spider-Man, I feel like Nick Harbor is going to be like Forrest Gump at Bama. Just give him the ball and let him run. Hell of a way to phrase it. Let's jump to the text line here. We do have a text. Let's see. Text says, our veteran-heavy team could help take the team to at least 10 wins this season. I also believe Joyner's explosive playability will be showcased at the most this season as RB1. Hey, listen, man. I'll just say this. I'll say this because I really do respect all predictions. If you can sit there and you can give me real football reasons why Carolina's going to win 10 games, I respect it. I do. I don't agree with you, but I respect it. I respect it. So, anyways, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much for the continued love and support. An electric Monday show as we get everything rocking and rolling. Of course, guys, TDC going to be normal this week, noon to 3. A quick update, though, on the TDC front. Unfortunately, and I hate to give you this news because it's not good news, but it is what it is. JD Piquel of On3 will no longer join our show as a weekly guest. Now, again, we're going to do some work with JD in regards to during the season, getting him on. But Talk with JD On3 is adding some things to his plate, another show they wanted to do, creating more content. And obviously, guys, On3 is his job, his livelihood. That's how he makes a living. And so I totally understand that, as he adds more to his plate, he's got to allocate the time to do those things and also have a personal life, have his own life, what have you. So there was a conflict of the On3 stuff, TDC. So unfortunately, there will be no more JD Piquel of On3. We are looking for a guest to fill that Wednesday spot. I got a couple in mind right now that I'm working on and talking with. But, right now, JD Piquel, all you need to know is he will not be joining the show every single Wednesday. And, again, I hate it because JD was such a valuable asset to TDC, and I thought our segments were really valuable, and you guys enjoyed. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast. So it is what it is. Justin Bryant says, what would surprise you more? The offensive line performing well or Rattler performing worse? And I'm assuming, Justin, when you say worse, you mean like worse than last year. What would surprise me more is Rattler being worse than last year. Listen, surprises can happen. If the offensive line is solid, see, and that's the thing. Performing well for me is just be solid. Just don't be an eyesore. Finish inside the top 100 in rushing offense. Dude, I don't see Spencer Rattler having a worse season he did last year, man, because he was abysmal for 90% of it. I don't see 18 touchdowns, 12 interceptions a season ago. I don't think he takes a step back from that, my personal opinion. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Football Frank.
Football Frank, what is going on, my friend? And I promise you, you are not being censored. I finally got to your question. What's going on?
I'm not even sure I said that.
I hear you. What's up, man? How you been?
I doing good. I just, I wanted to see if I could change your mind on this North Carolina, South Carolina game one being the most important game of our season.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm not even gonna. I don't even want to talk about the two quarterbacks. I mean, you got Drake May, who's like a heavy favorite for a Heisman. So this whole thing's going to be about the Heisman. He's a heavy favorite for the Heisman, and I think if he loses that game, he's just going to be shuttled right out of the top 10 and playing in the league he's in. I don't think he's ever going to be able to recover from that. And this is also Spencer's way, and I'm not trying to jinx the kid. I love him. He's not in the Heisman conversation right now, but if he wants to get on the radar, he's got to win that game. So it's a tale of two cities, I think, for literally, actually, for the Heisman Trophy. It's going to be a make or break for both guys.
Yeah, Frank, I mean, I will say this. It's an important game for sure. The only reason I just refrain from making it the most important game is because we've seen South Carolina start slow and close out strong. And, I mean, you look at last year. Many labeled Arkansas week 2 as the most important game of the season. And South Carolina got dragged up and down the field. That game probably wasn't as close as the final score indicated. Hell, I labeled Mizzou as the most important. That game was in the middle of the season. I thought there was no way South Carolina would have a successful year if they lost to Missouri. And sure enough, we saw what happened. You beat Tennessee, beat Clemson, all as well. So it's a huge tone setter game, Frank. It's a game that you need. I mean, I think the big thing is this. Folks want to believe that South Carolina can at minimum reach last year's win total, if not exceed it. And so in that regard, that is a massive game. Because if you see Spencer Rattler, the offense come out, the running game looks better than maybe we expected, but Rattler's on point. Juice Wells' defense has a great game. And let's say you win that UNC game by 2 touchdowns. I don't think it guarantees that you're going to go win 9 games. But if you lose that game and you look porous in doing so, it all but guarantees you won't win 9 games. You see what I'm saying? So it's almost like
absolutely
you have more to lose than to gain in that game one. You have a lot to gain, don't get me wrong, but I think that's why it's so important to people, because it's like, hey, if we win, we're on track and we can still reach that 8-win mark from last year, if not more. If we lose, all of a sudden, we got to look ourselves in the mirror and honestly reset expectations, because the path to 8 or 9 wins just got that much more tougher.
Yeah, I think if you lose that first game, your ceiling now is 8. I mean, if you win that first game, you can start to entertain all this, garnet glasses stuff about 9 wins and 10 wins. But if you do not win that first game, your ceiling is now 8, and you're probably looking at a 7-win or 6-win season, because we got some tough games to play, and you can't go dropping game 1. And I know Vegas thinks it's a +3, but I just don't see it. And the other thing about the Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky thing, I mean, we got some set of glasses on when you lose 4 consecutive games to Missouri and you still think you're a better program than them. I mean, that's when, sooner or later you got to say, you are your record. Kentucky's been beating us up recently. So other than last year, they've had our number. So, like I said, with that group in the bar looking across going, there's no way we're as ugly as they are.
Well, Frank, and I'll say this. Listen, you beat Kentucky last year, so you have bragging rights. That's great and everything. Speaking specifically like on the Mizzou thing, I mean, listen, you can think whatever you want, think Mizzou's the redheaded stepchild of the league, and you can think that they don't recruit as well as we do. They're not that good. They don't recruit as well as us. But if you are a fan out there trash talking another program, when that program is beating your favorite team year in, year out, you just look like fool. You look like a fool. I mean, you look like a straight up fool. I mean, you do. You are someone whose opinion should not be taken seriously. Like if you're out there saying, I don't care if we lose to Mizzou again, we're still better than them. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. I mean, I don't think Carolina fans like to hear that back in 10-12 when Carolina was beating Georgia 3 in a row, right? I'm sure Georgia fans felt the same way. We're still better than them, even though Carolina's winning. Ain't no Gamecock fan was wanting to hear that, right? I mean, it just, it doesn't apply. So listen, you beat Kentucky this year. I think obviously again, you've got that thing back on the right track. You've won 3 of the last 5. That's one again. If South Carolina, and I thought one thing that Nick Roush really hit on well that could apply to all 3 of the schools. You mentioned Kentucky, Mizzou, and South Carolina. Those 3, I think, are all kind of similar middle-of-the-pack teams. Just call it what it is. Their records against each other determine what type of program they are, what type of season they have. For South Carolina to have a good season, more often than not, you got to beat Kentucky, Mizzou, and Vandy. Those are games you just have to win. And you got to win them more often than you lose them. That's why I say over the course of a decade. I don't think 5 years is enough of a sample size. Give me over the course of a decade. You need to be 7-3 or 8-2 against these teams over the course of a decade to really be moving up that SEC ladder. If you're sitting there 5-5, 6-4, 4-6, whatever, you're on the same playing field, whether you like it or not. So South Carolina can get back way ahead of Kentucky or jump ahead of Mizzou, but you got to win on the field. I mean, that's what counts. I don't care how goofy.
You got to win a game.
I don't care how goofy you think their coach is or how crappy their facilities are or they're a joke, their schedule. They're beating you. They're beating you. Missouri is beating you like a rented mule. Kentucky has beaten you a lot, more than they should. I don't think anybody would disagree with that statement. So you just got to start beating those teams. I mean, bottom line, you got to start beating those teams and building some streaks against those teams.
Definitely. And I think that's the problem affecting our, we want to cry about how recruiting has slowed down. I mean, so literally in 4 years, you got a losing record against Missouri and a recruiter's looking at that. This is a bottom line culture. Like you got to give me a record that says, hey man, I want to come play there.
Yeah. And I mean, again, that's why this year's so big, man. You get back to 8-4. I think, again, you keep that positive momentum on the recruiting trail, convincing these top guys, hey, we're just a key piece or 2 away, and you can be that guy and, come help us build something special. So I think Shane Beamer's got it in control in recruiting. I think it's been a subdued summer, which is the only point I was making this morning, that it's like, man, I just would have never guessed that the cookout weekend would have happened and we don't get a single welcome home. I mean, granted, I know it might be coming weeks down the road, but it's still just, it don't change the fact that it's been a much more quiet summer than I expected. But to your point, Frank, you keep winning on the field. I think South Carolina, the recruiting is going to be fine. All that'll be taken care of.
You got it. You have a great week.
Frank, I appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure. You too. Great stuff from Football Frank here on this Monday. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, I want to continue to hear from you more of your questions, your comments, your calls, and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back. Taking your questions, comments, calls, 843-790-3377. I want to continue to hear from you. You can also text that number at 843-790-3377. Again, an electric start of the week. I want to say thank you yet again to Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. So great stuff, guys, as we get ready for fall camp. Players report on Thursday. Fall camp gets going Friday. Of course, other teams in the SEC have begun. Vandy's been on the practice field for about a week or so. Florida hit the practice field today. It's football time, man. It's getting rolling. Brian Dean, what's up, my man? Appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much, Brian, for taking the time to jump on. What's up, man? What's up? Ethan says, to me, the season's shaping up to be very similar to the 2014 year with Dylan. Really good offensive year, but lost a lot in the defense of 2013. Time will tell. Ethan, I don't think there's any way this defense is that bad. I'll
Call
put it that
from
way.
Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer.
Robbie, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing on this Monday?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. I appreciate you asking. What's going on?
First things first, I want to give a shout out to Cody Gaskins. It's his birthday today. So if you're listening, Cody, happy birthday, bro. I hope you have a fantastic birthday. And
Shout out to Cody Gaskins. Happy birthday
also-
to Cody Gaskins, indeed. Yes, sir.
And I think, in my opinion, and I thought about this last night while I watched the simulation last night before I went to bed and everything, because he was already done with it by the time I started watching it. But anyways, I think in the Furman game in week 2 and the game against Jacksonville State, if we are absolutely just kicking the ever-loving crap out of the both of them, I would not be surprised one bit if Lenoris Sellers or any of the other quarterbacks got any playing time. But I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Lenoris Sellers got to go in there for a drive or two, because he's got to get his sea legs, because this is his first year playing college ball. So I would not be surprised if that were to happen in the Furman game or the game against Jacksonville State.
Well, and I'll say
Out
that
of the quarterback.
yeah, I was just going to say, Robbie, and I would
go ahead.
expect South Carolina to utilize Lenoris Sellers at different points this season. I will say, though, the simulation is a lot of fun. I would not say it is a direct reflection of what will happen this year. For example, last year in the simulation had Carolina beating Georgia, and then the Gamecocks lost 48-7 in real life. So you never know, but yeah, to your point, I think South Carolina will exhaust all options to be productive on offense this year.
Yeah, I would say after last year that this coaching staff is going to do whatever it has to do to put a good product on the field, because I can assure you they do not want another repeat performance of what happened last season, because we did not get it going until like the weeks we were preparing for Tennessee and Clemson. So I am definitely I would not be surprised if they did whatever they had to do to put a decent product on the field for the fan base this year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, getting the offense going is the number one priority right now of the Shane Beamer era. Bottom line, because even if you go 7-5, 8-4 again, whatever, if the offense is still sputtering, I don't think people are going to be all that thrilled. Dabble Loggins needs to prove to be the right guy. He needs to prove to be the right hire. And like it or not, it's there is no grace period. He's going to be judged very harshly. Heck, he's going to be compared side by side with Garrett Riley over at Clemson, like it or not. That's just the reality, and that's the pressure he faces, and that hire needs to work. The offense needs to work. Spencer Rattler needs to have a big year. The question marks up front need to be answered in a positive way. Juice Wells needs to be probably a 1,000-yard guy. Like, the offense as a whole needs to be productive. Too many times last year it was dead, it sputtered, it looked out of sync. It was ugly. It was just flat out ugly. And people, as much as they want to win, they don't want to win ugly. Like, people don't want to win ugly forever. I mean, I'd much rather take an ugly win than a pretty loss, but like at some point it wears on people when you're just so bad offensively. So without a doubt, Robbie, to your point, getting the offense going, that's priority number one for Beamer and company this year.
Yeah. And like I've said before, if the Dowell Loggins hire does not work, all eyes are they're not going to be solely on Dowell Loggins. The eyes will start to shift towards Beamer. They're going to start thinking to themselves, can this guy actually hire a decent OC that can at least have us be competitive year in and year out? And we still don't, and like I've said before, we don't know. We won't know until September the 2nd if Dowell Loggins is the guy.
Well, listen, I'll
Fall
say this.
camp
I
is
don't
different
I don't think one game is going to define what Dowell Loggins is, but it's an important game. I mean, for sure, because the defenses will only get better, and we all know that. But, I'm not going to sit here and say if they don't score 40 in week 1, he's not the guy. But, I mean, listen, it's an important game. And again, there's no grace period for Dowell because I think everyone's expecting them to just pick up where they left off at the end of last year and just score 63 points against UNC, against Tennessee, and just keep it rolling. And, I hope that happens. I really do. I hope there's fireworks from the jump. I hope they run out of fireworks, at the Furman game. And I hope that happens, man. I really hope that happens, but only time will tell, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's all I got. I'm going to go ahead and get off here and give other people a chance to call. That's all I had.
Robbie, you're the man. I appreciate you calling in, brother. Always great to hear from you. We'll talk this week.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, great stuff. Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer. Always a pleasure to hear from him. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I'm not. But Brennan M., Big Cock Club Discord, Loggins will be compared to Riley as long as you keep making the comparison. Brendan, do you actually think that I'm the only one? Do you think that Gamecock fans don't keep up with the rival? Do you think they don't compare and dude, that is so far removed from just a me thing. You know what I'm saying is accurate. Gamecock fans on a week in, week out basis, they pull for Carolina and whoever's playing Clemson. And they don't follow they follow Carolina, and guess who they follow the second closest? Which team do Gamecock fans follow the second closest? Clemson football team. And vice versa. Clemson fans, they follow the Gamecocks, the second most to their Tigers. So don't give me that nonsense of, oh, well, you're the one. Dude, I could say nothing and that'd be the case. I went to lunch yesterday with our guy, Dave Garrick, and one of the first things he brought up was, Dowell Loggins, he's going to be compared to Riley. Like, I'm far from the only one saying that. Fans are saying that. When Garrett Riley was hired by Clemson, it was fans on Twitter that were freaking out about it. It was far from just me. So miss me with that nonsense. Anyways, 843-790-3377. Brian Dean, Loggins was a great hire. I hope you're correct, Brian. I hope you're correct. Good hire. Better than Sat, which is really all that matters. Let's see. Again, guys, taking your questions, comments, calls, 843-790-3377. Andrew, quick. Actually, let's jump to the phone lines real quick. Let's jump to this call.
Peyton.
Here we go. Peyton, what's going on, my man? How are you?
Good about yourself, Chris. What's going on, partner?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you asking. Just excited to be here. What's up?
So, I hadn't heard any rumbling about Dylan Stewart in quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to get impatient. We have plenty of reason to be faithful. We have plenty of reason to be faithful. However, and it's Gamecock bad luck. There's always a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little scared about Jonathan Paylor as well. And I think I really don't think we can afford to lose those two guys. I mean, we got such a firm grasp on Dylan Stewart. He's been on campus, I think, close to 10 times now. And I think we got to seal the deal pretty soon. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
So I'll start with the Dylan Stewart thing. And based off all accounts, everything we heard, again, J.C. Sherwood will join us tomorrow and give us a full breakdown of the cookout weekend, recruiting, everything going on. I mean, I would say the Gamecocks are still in good standing with Dylan Stewart. I think Dylan Stewart's commitment is something that's just going to come down to the wire, man, between the Gamecocks, Ohio State, Miami seem to think they have a chance. I think NIL is a factor in this recruitment, but I think South Carolina is in a good spot. Now, Jonathan Paylor, I'll tell you this, Peyton, I think you have reason to worry. I think he's going to NC State. Unless something changes based off what we heard, I think he is Wolfpack bound. I think he is NC State bound. So Paylor, it sucks to lose out on him because you've led for the most part. And again, this is not just a guess I'm making. I mean, J.C. Sherbert talked about this last week. Paylor was at NC State over the weekend. But I think Stewart, the Gamecocks, are still in a pretty good spot. There were other guys on campus as well. Jalewis Solomon made it to campus. That was a big one. Jonte Gilbert, who decommitted from Ohio State. That was a big move over the weekend. Could spell good things for South Carolina. But, and then, of course, Daniel Hill is a guy that we're expecting. His commitment date comes up in the month of August. I'll tell you this, Peyton, to what you said, though, in the beginning. I don't blame you at all for the patience growing thin. It's not because you're saying Beamer's doing a bad job or you're attacking their efforts. You're just normally June and July is when this program has made the most movement in recruiting, and we haven't seen that this year. And again, so it's not that like anybody's doubting that come December the guys that we need will be there, that South Carolina needs will be there, but they haven't made that type of noise that they've made over the past couple of years over the summer months. And that's just reality, and that's okay, but it's just the reality. So you need to land Dylan Stewart. You need to land Hill. Again, unfortunately, I think Jonathan Paylor is bound for NC State. And, beyond that, you just can continue to build a recruiting class. But, I mean, listen, man, again, just keep it a buck. Just keep it transparent. Nobody's having a lot of fun right now watching Tennessee and Clemson and some of these other schools, LSU, Auburn, pick up these big-time commitments. And South Carolina, it feels like, has been stagnant. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Gamecocks rank outside of the top 25 right now in recruiting. So you tell me, I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to finish there. Alabama was outside the top 25 at one point, and they're Alabama. They're back in the top 5. But, I understand. It's hard to be patient, but I guess we just have to do that going into August, and hopefully a couple of big pieces land soon here for Carolina.
Yeah, and to add to your point, June and July they've usually been hot points for us, and the momentum just kind of ceased almost. Now we picked up some solid guys. We picked up some 3-stars, some guys that were 3-stars at time of commitment that earned a 4th star, and so that's always good to hear. But these potential flagship guys, we gotta start landing some of them, and I really hope some of it'll be soon. And like you said, I'm not attacking the recruitment methods. I'm not attacking Shane Beamer or the Carolina program as recruiters, because they've obviously done a great job thus far. But it's the waters have started to become a little stagnant, and I think we need to start making a little more waves here to close this recruiting class out.
Yeah,
and of course, it's
well, I was just going to say this, Peyton. You don't have to explain yourself to me, but unfortunately, you have to explain yourself to a lot of folks out there who think any just slightly critical thing you say is like you're a hater or whatever. I mean, I think you're just speaking openly and freely, and I welcome that. So I promise you, I won't preface anything you say with that again. But I just want you to know, I hear where you're coming from. I think the perspective is fair, and I think anybody else is just trying to paint a sunshine and rainbows type of scenario. And I just think it comes from a status. It comes from a feeling of not angst and anger, but just wanting to see the best and just, wanting it to happen now. You know what I mean? Like bad doctors and
That's
football
right, yeah.
fans, we both have no patience. That's what we have in common. So, there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, apply pressure. I believe in applying pressure. Do so. Pressure makes diamonds, and there's pressure to recruit. There's pressure to get these guys right now. You had this hot start. You've fallen off. You need to finish strong. There should be pressure. The Gamecocks landing Dylan Stewart, that's just one you got to have, man. You got to have him. You got to get him. There's a couple of guys, Daniel Hill, you got to get him. You got to get edge. You got to get running back. There's a couple of guys you got to get. I think those two are top of the line for sure.
And I think if guys like that fall through, I just think it'll be a big punch in the gut to a lot of hopeful Carolina fans out there that had all this hope come in, and we're going to keep the momentum going, and we're going to take it to another level, and we're going to do this and win 8 games and do all this other stuff. I mean, it's only going to make it harder to keep winning consistently if you don't nail these 5-star guys down. And we nailed the big fish last year, Nick Harbor, but we need to land 2. We need to land 2 or 3, and that'll be the difference maker come October, come September, November. have your stars shine, and you got to have big stars to do it in the SEC.
And I will say, Peyton, on the last note, that is something that adds pressure to this season, because I think there are a couple of guys that, you go out and win 9 games. I think there's a couple of guys out there that might commit somewhere else that they might rethink that decision. You know what I mean? If they see like South Carolina, they're really on the rise. They're doing big things. Like I can go there and like next year, my year as a freshman, or definitely my year as a sophomore or junior, like we could be, competing for a playoff or whatever. So, there's pressure all over the place, man, which again, it comes with it when the SEC, it's just nature of the beast. But listen, I hear everything you're saying on the recruiting side, man. So we'll see if they can get it going.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, Chris. I'm going to head on back into work here, man. Thanks, Spurs Up Show. Go Cox, man. Appreciate it.
Peyton, go Cox. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the call. Great stuff. Great stuff from Peyton. I appreciate the perspective. And again, guys, it does not make you a bad fan if you're a little bit frustrated with recruiting right now. It's not fun watching Clemson land guys and Tennessee land guys and those guys be in the top 10. Is that fun to you? That's not fun, especially when Carolina was there at one point and they are nowhere near there now. So need some guys to boost this class back up. Top 15 at minimum. You got to finish the top 20 class. I say our good friend, the amount of times he calls me a slapdick, I wouldn't know. Brennan M says apparently Carolina is now 20th in recruiting. Is that via 24/7? And it might be. I did not honestly look at it after Zymarian Lang committed. So either way, the Gamecocks, huge month of August upcoming with some of those guys out there right now. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll close this thing out in style. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back. Final 10 minutes or so here in the Daily Crow, taking your questions, your comments, your calls, 843-790-3377 as we close this thing out in style. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in, your love, your support. Appreciate you all supporting the merchandise side of the business as well. TSUS.store or the Spurs Up Show is where we can be found. Again, thank you all so much. Really excited for this week, all the content, everything that we've got rocking and rolling all week long. Let's see. Let's see. Getting back into your questions, Austin Gregory, if we were to go 11-1, which game would you prefer we lose? For me, it's North Carolina. I mean, I get why you say that, Austin, because if you lose to UNC and go 11-1, you won the SEC East. I don't know, man. If you go 11-1, I'd probably agree with you, Austin. Let's make things fun. Let's go 11-1, but lose to Furman. I'm down with that. Okay. Travie, by the way, to answer your question, are we outside of the top 25 in recruiting? We are 24th in the 24/7 Sports rankings, 20th in the On3 rankings. So, between 20 to 25, depending on which service you look at. Brian Dean, it seems to be all about NIL. Players are going to follow the money. NIL is a big factor, Brian. There's no question. It is a very big factor, no doubt. He says Sam Hartman jumped from Wake Forest to Notre Dame for more exposure and notoriety. I mean, it's, again, man, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, you can complain about NIL all you want, but I don't know if you saw Spencer Rattler posted a picture on his Instagram story with a new G-Wagon. Somebody literally gave him a new G-Wagon. So Carolina is benefiting from NIL. Like, they are. They are. So maybe not as much as some other schools, but they are. So let's see. John Edward, keep Under Armour instead of going to Jumpman. I disagree with you completely. That's fine. John Edward, to answer your question for Friday, I would rather beat Clemson than Georgia right now. Fair enough. Travie, we definitely need some welcome homes. Yeah, Travie. I mean, that's not even a hot take. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. If you don't want some welcome homes, I don't know what you're doing. I tell you who's crushing it, by the way, in recruiting, and you can make all the jokes you want and throw stones and whatever. That's fine. Get your shots in while you can. But I tell you, man, what Hugh Freeze is doing at Auburn, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised either. Like Hugh Freeze, he's recruited everywhere he's gone. He's recruited well everywhere he's been. He's won everywhere he's been. So I tell you guys, I think the way that Auburn's recruiting, I mean, you look at that program, I saw Jake Crane talking about this morning, when Auburn's in alignment, they can be a big-time program. I mean, if that's the case and they've got the guy and they're flipping guys from Bama getting 5-star, dude, all of a sudden. But again, guys, I just, I understand. Listen, I get it. I get it. When it comes to the recruiting space, we're going to close out the show with this. When it comes to the recruiting space, listen, I've learned my lesson. I totally understand, right? I learned very early on that you cannot be critical in any way in recruiting. You cannot. Fans do not receive it well. And what I mean by being critical in recruiting, like the way that you analyze commitments or pickups, like there's plenty of room to analyze and say, this kid's a diamond in the rough. This kid's he's going to be a star. He's going to be a stud. There's plenty of room for that. There is no room, and I've never heard someone from 24/7 or On3 or Rivals, I've never heard them a commitment happen and them go, he has a chance. I don't expect much from the guy. I'll be surprised he makes an impact. Probably going to be a good fit for the football team, but does he really make an impact? We'll see. You never hear that. You never hear it. And then speaking on recruiting critically in the sense of, hey, you're not doing well enough. X team. I'm not talking about South Carolina. I'm just saying in general. Hey, what's wrong with this team? Why aren't they recruiting better? What's going wrong at this place? You cannot speak on it that way. Recruiting in this weird way is built on either speak on it positively or don't speak at all. And again, I've learned my lesson. I like recruiting. I think it's cool. It's the lifeblood of college football. It's the lifeblood of athletics. I get it. But I think that's probably why I don't cover recruiting as much, because it's lather, rinse, repeat. You get a 3-star, he's a diamond in the rough. You get a 4-star, he's a great player. You get a 5-star, he's the next greatest Gamecock ever. Like, that's all it is. That's the analysis. That's where it ends. That's basically where it ends. Maybe not every 3-star is a diamond in the rough. Not every 4-star is going to pan out. Not every 5-star is the next best thing. I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm just, you can't even say something like, man, it's been a while since Carolina's got to welcome home. What's happened? What are they not doing that Florida's doing? Who's ranked 3rd in the country in recruiting right now? Tennessee's moving up. Clemson's moving up. If you just even acknowledge that, the low-hanging fruit, the common sense, people lose their minds. It's not hitting the panic button. It's not questioning Shane Beamer or anything. It's just, Carolina has fallen off since April. They have. The rankings reflect it. Now, they can get back on. They can get back on track. Hey, that's the beautiful thing, guys. We haven't reached signing day. We have not reached signing day. So South Carolina can get Dylan Stewart. They can get Daniel Hill. Hell, they could flip Jonathan Paylor. Heck, I don't know. There's plenty of guys out there. Jalewis Solomon. Like, they could go get some of these guys. It's not over. The race is far from over. But, like, do you blame people for being antsy? Do you blame people for, losing patience? Like, we've gone the whole summer, and I mean, Carolina's picked up some guys like the Johnson kid, Fred Johnson at linebacker, and the Matthew Fuller kid at running back, who have gone from 3 stars to 4 stars. And that should be acknowledged, by the way, right? Like, that should. Great job on the staff by identifying that those guys were undervalued. Guy like Zymerian Lang, who you just picked up over the weekend. Hey, a guy that runs a 4.31 in the 40. A lot of folks are high on him. Good job. But love it or hate it, people look at the rankings and they go, "What? Why is Carolina 24th? Weren't they just 5th? Even why are they 20th? Weren't they 5th like 3 months ago? What's happened?" That's not being negative. It's not being a bad fan. It's not attacking Beamer. It's just being real about the situation. The best news, though, is it can change. It can still change. You go land Dylan Stewart alone, and that right there, boom, you're right back at the top of the college football world, the recruiting landscape. You're right back on top. That's what I'm saying, man. Like, nobody wants to hear objective analysis on recruiting. They don't. They might say they want to, but no, they don't. No, they don't. Because you don't want me to start going out there and, oh, Carolina got this pickup in the portal. They got this pickup from this 3-star. Nobody wants to hear objective analysis, because I've done that once, and damn it, that backfired. Did not go very well. And so I learned my lesson. So I refrain completely. And again, everybody that chooses to be a Gamecock should be celebrated. And even I say that, though, and in the world of NIL, though, many guys are getting paid to come to your school. So that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, folks. That's a whole different convo for a whole different day. And I'm going to leave it at that. Anyways, guys, hey, fantastic Monday. Content's electric. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you. Always a blast. Thank you to Mark Rogers for taking the time in hour number 2. Great stuff, hour number 1. And you guys, of course, filling up the time with questions, comments, calls, injecting the value that you do each and every single day. I cannot say thank you enough. Of course, TDC rocking and rolling all week long. Normal time, noon to 3. Excited to get back in our position unit preview series tomorrow as we talk wide receivers. We'll close out the opponent preview series tomorrow talking the Clemson Tigers. And of course, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live. And also, of course, hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We drop the podcast on a daily basis. Guys, that'll do it for me. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.